Chapter 34-24. Just kidding? Not only were Hua Lao and Duan Ling Tian stunned by the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor's words, but even the Purple Spike Celestial Emperor and the others from the heavenly palace of the floating heaven were taken aback. They had known the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor for a long time, but they did not expect him to be so shameless. However, after thinking about it for a while, they felt relieved. It was obvious the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor had no other choice. If he continued to be stubborn, even the Heavenly Emperor of the floating heaven would not be able to protect him. However, did he think his actions would work? Young Master Duan, since my son is disrespectful to you, I'll definitely punish him severely. I'll tell him to avoid you if he sees you in the future. What do you think? The Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor looked at Duan Ling Tian humbly. He was no longer as arrogant as before. Stop acting like a fool. Duan Ling Tian glanced at the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor indifferently. Clearly, he did not intend to fall for the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor's words. Since you and your son want to kill me, how can I let you off so easily? In the future, will people try to kill me every time I leave the floating heaven Celestial Emperor's mansion? Will I forgive them when they realize they're not capable of killing me? Duan Ling Tian looked at the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor coldly as he said, "What a joke! If you're in my shoes, will you let those who treat you like this go?" Duan Ling Tian's voice became even colder. The Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor's expression darkened when he heard Duan Ling Tian's words. However, he quickly forced a smile on his face and said, "Young Master Duan, look at your wife. She's my third junior sister's disciple. Speaking of which, she has to address me as senior uncle as well. Since we're close, why don't you let us off for my third junior sister's sake?" The Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor said. As soon as the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor finished speaking, Duan Ling Tian did not look at him. Instead, he looked at the Purple Spike Celestial Emperor who had just arrived. The Purple Spike Celestial Emperor's expression darkened when she heard the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor's words. Now that she saw Duan Ling Tian looking at her, she felt her face burning. At the same time, she glared at the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor and said, "Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor, why are you trying to drag me into this? Why didn't you remember he's the husband of my beloved disciple when you wanted to kill him?" Now, the Purple Spike Celestial Emperor no longer addressed the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor as senior brother. Instead, she addressed him by his title. The Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor's expression changed when he heard the Purple Spike Celestial Emperor's words. He knew his third junior sister had no intention of helping him. On the other hand, Duan Ling Tian was obviously unwilling to give up. In other words, there was no room for negotiation in this matter. Run. In the end, the Almighty Wind Immortal Emperor decided to flee. However, he didn't flee alone. Instead, he dashed towards his son, Kong Yu-yi, preparing to flee together with him. Kong Yu-yi was dumbfounded when the Purple Spike Celestial Emperor confirmed Duan Ling Tian's identity. Although he was mentally prepared when it was confirmed, he still felt fear and horror from the bottom of his heart. Duan Ling Tian, the young master of the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven, was actually the young master of the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven? I'll bring you away. Kong Yu-yi's eyes lit up when he heard the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor's voice transmission. In his opinion, with his father's speed, it would not be difficult for his father to bring him away. Although his third junior uncle was stronger than his father, his speed was slightly slower than his father. After all, his father had comprehended the law of wind. Trying to escape? How could Elder Hua not see through the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor's intention when he saw the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor charging at Kong Yu-yi instead of attacking Duan Ling Tian? Naturally, he knew the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor was trying to escape with his son. In just a blink of an eye, golden flames appeared in Hua Lao's eyes. It was as though two rays of light had appeared in the darkness, illuminating everything. In the next moment, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Elder Hua's body swayed and transformed into a humongous golden bird that was as big as a hill. The bird's entire body was burning with golden flames. From afar, it looked like a scorching sun. It was impossible to see the outline of its body. Swoosh, swoosh. Although Hua Lao did not specialize in the law of wind, he was a flying demonic beast. His speed was naturally fast. Coupled with his comprehension of the law of fire, his speed was comparable to the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor. Instead of charging at the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor, he charged at Kong Yu-yi. After all, he knew the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor's target was Kong Yu-yi. No. The Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor did not expect Hua Lao to be so fast after reverting to his true form. His expression changed drastically as he cried out in pain. Alas, the almighty Wind Celestial Emperor abandoned Kong Yu and fled into the distance under everyone's watchful eyes. As for Hua Lao, his reaction was not as fast as the almighty Wind Celestial Emperor. When he tried to chase after the almighty Wind Celestial Emperor, the almighty Wind Celestial Emperor had already disappeared. If the almighty Wind Celestial Emperor was a foreign-titled Celestial Emperor, it would be difficult for him to escape in the heavenly palace of the floating heaven. However, the problem was he was a titled Celestial Emperor in the heavenly palace of the floating heaven. Moreover, he was the second true disciple of the heavenly Emperor of the floating heaven. On the other hand, if Hua Lao tried to chase after the almighty Wind Celestial Emperor, the distance between them would only widen. For this reason, Hua Lao decided not to chase after the almighty Wind Celestial Emperor. Instead, he turned to look at the purple spike Celestial Emperor who had an equally unsightly expression on her face. Purple Spike Celestial Emperor, please inform the Heavenly Emperor of the Floating Heaven of this matter. The Heavenly Palace of the Floating Heaven will have to give the Heavenly Palace of the Solitary Destructive Heaven an explanation for this matter. At the end of his sentence, Elder Hua's expression turned solemn as he spoke in a deep voice. Hua Lao, don't worry. The Heavenly Palace of the Floating Heaven will definitely give you a satisfactory explanation, the Purple Spike Celestial Emperor said in a low voice. At the same time, she sent a message to her master, Yang Yunxiao, the Heavenly Emperor of the Floating Heaven, who had just returned not long ago. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian looked at Kong Yu who had an unsightly expression on his face and said with a faint smile on his face, Kong Yu, your father is really generous. I can't believe he abandoned you just like that. Duan Lingtian. Kong Yu glared at Duan Lingtian with an unsightly expression on his face as he said in a deep voice, My father just sent me a message to tell you that if you dare to kill me, he won't let you off even if you're the young master of the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. You can't possibly hide in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven forever, right? A hint of threat could be seen in Kong Yu's eyes when he spoke. Is that so? Faced with Kong Yu's threat, Duan Lingtian merely looked at Kong Yu before a sneer appeared on his face. Slap. The purple spike Celestial Emperor slapped Kong Yu in the face. She said coldly, Kong Yu, even if Duan Lingtian doesn't kill you, the heavenly palace of the floating heaven will definitely not let you off. Third Junior Ant. Half of Kong Yu's face was swollen from the slap. When he opened his mouth he spat out half of his teeth. With a solemn expression on his face, he said to the purple spike Celestial Emperor, My father also told me to tell you that if the heavenly palace of the floating heaven kills me, he'll kill everyone who leaves the heavenly palace of the floating heaven. Once I'm dead, he'll have nothing to worry about. He'll only live for vengeance. A sinister smile could be seen on Kong Yu's face as he looked at the people from the heavenly palace of the floating heaven who were watching from afar. Their expressions changed drastically when they saw this. Was the almighty Wind Celestial Emperor really so crazy? He was willing to make an enemy out of the heavenly palace of the floating heaven for his son? Was he seeking death? Do you think he'll be able to escape? The purple spike Celestial Emperor asked as she looked at Kong Yu indifferently. Chem? Kong Yu was taken aback when he heard the purple spike Celestial Emperor's words. When he saw the disdainful smile on the purple spike Celestial Emperor's face, an ominous feeling rose in his heart. Father? Kong Yu sent a message to his father. However, there was no reply. At this moment, swoosh. Like a gust of wind, an aged figure appeared before the crowd. The way he appeared was like a ghost, causing everyone's heart to tremble. It was an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion. When he appeared, there was another person standing next to him with an ashen expression on his face. This person was none other than the almighty Wind Celestial Emperor who had fled earlier. As for the old man, Greetings, Lord Heavenly Emperor. Lord Heavenly Emperor. When the two old men appeared, the people from the heavenly palace of the floating heaven bowed respectfully at the old man. None of them dared to show any disrespect. The old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion was none other than Yang Yunxiao, the heavenly emperor of the floating heaven. As soon as Yang Yunxiao appeared, he brought the almighty Wind Celestial Emperor with him. It was clear the almighty Wind Celestial Emperor did not manage to escape. I've learned about the ins and outs of this matter. Yang Yunxiao indifferently glanced at Kong Yu in the distance. Kong Yu was so scared that his face turned pale. He knew that everything was over. His father had actually been captured and brought back by this grandmaster of his. It was over. It was all over. How dare you and your father attempt to take the life of the young master of the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven? Yang Yunxiao glanced at Kong Yu before looking at the almighty wind celestial emperor. He couldn't help but snort coldly. Kong Yu was so frightened that he fell to his knees and kowtowed to Yang Yunxiao. Grandmaster, I was wrong. Please spare my life. Please spare my life. Grandmaster, I know I was wrong. Kong Yu continued to beg for mercy. His grandmaster had doted on him a lot in the past. In his opinion, as long as he begged sincerely, he might be able to survive. However, he had underestimated the severity of this matter. Faced with his begging for forgiveness, Yang Yunxiao's ugly expression did not ease up in the slightest. Instead, it grew even uglier. You're a scammer. Yang Yunxiao coldly shouted. He didn't seem to do anything, but Kong Yu, a living person, instantly exploded, turning into a bloody mist that filled the sky. Chapter 34:25. Yang Yunxiao, the heavenly emperor of the floating heaven, killed Kong Yu with just a thought. The people from the floating heaven held their breaths when they saw this. This was the first time most of them had seen the heavenly emperor of the floating heaven make a move. After Kong Yu was killed, the almighty wind immortal emperor had a look of grief on his face. When he looked at Yang Yunxiao again, other than anger, there was more fear in his eyes. Although his strength was not bad in front of this master of his, it was nothing at all. Junior nephew Duan. After killing Kong Yu, Yang Yunxiao looked at Duan Lingtian and said with a smile on his face, Kong Yu is the culprit, so I've killed him. As for Kong Fen, since he loves his son dearly, why don't you spare his life? Before Duan Lingtian could reply, Yang Yunxiao continued to say, naturally he can escape death, but he can't escape punishment. The heavenly emperor of the floating heaven will imprison Kong Fen for 100 years. Duan Lingtian's heart sank when he heard Yang Yunxiao's words. Even Hua Lao frowned slightly. They could tell what Yang Yunxiao meant. The heavenly emperor of the floating heaven was trying to save the almighty wind celestial emperor's life. He pushed all the blame onto Kong Yu, who had just been killed by him, and made Kong Yu bear more than 99% of the blame. Imprisoning the almighty wind celestial emperor for 100 years? What was the difference between that and not being punished at all? Even if the heavenly emperor of the floating heaven did not punish the almighty wind celestial emperor, it was unlikely he would continue to imprison the almighty wind celestial emperor. At most, the almighty wind celestial emperor would just have to move to another place to cultivate. Lord Heavenly Emperor. Before Duan Lingtian could reply to Yang Yunxiao, Hua Lao could not help but interject. Don't you think your punishment for your second disciple is a little too light? Even if he's not the culprit, he should bear a small part of the blame, right? Hua Lao's expression darkened when he finished speaking. Duan Lingtian knew Yang Yunxiao cared more about his reaction than Hua Lao when he saw Yang Yunxiao looking at him instead of Hua Lao. I agree with Hua Lao, Duan Lingtian said in a deep voice. Yang Yunxiao narrowed his eyes when he heard Duan Lingtian's words. Junior nephew Duan, do you mean my punishment is too light? As soon as Yang Yunxiao finished speaking, he continued to say, without waiting for Duan Lingtian, he continued to say, I'll increase his punishment. Junior nephew Duan Lingtian's Duan, right? Yang Yunxiao's expressions, Yang Yun's words as Yang Emperor's as Yang's Emperor's. Duan Lingtian felt as though his intelligence had been insulted when he heard Yang Yunxiao's words. His expression turned slightly gloomy at this moment. He was about to say something when the purple spike celestial emperor, Li Fei's master, sent a voice transmission to Duan Lingtian. Junior nephew Duan, it's obvious master wants to protect second senior brother. Unless your master, the heavenly emperor Feng Qingyang, is present, you won't be able to change his mind no matter what you say or do. It seems like I've underestimated second senior brother's importance to master. The purple spike celestial emperor said. Even the purple spike celestial emperor did not expect this outcome. Prior to this, she had thought Feng Qingyang, the heavenly emperor, was famous for being protective of his own people. After all, her master, the heavenly emperor of the floating heaven Yang Yunxiao, would definitely not forgive them for what they had done. She did not expect her master would only kill Kong Yu and spare her second senior brother's life. Perhaps master doesn't think heavenly emperor Feng Qingyang will come looking for him after he's dealt with second senior brother. The purple spike celestial emperor continued to say, after all, heavenly emperor Feng Qingyang and master are friends. Moreover, master did a good job in handling this matter. After all, no one can say for sure how much second senior brother is to blame. Duan Lingtian, who was initially filled with anger, calmed down when he heard the purple spike celestial emperor's words. After calming down, it was not difficult for him to confirm the purple spike celestial emperor's words. Since Heavenly Emperor Yang has made his decision, I have no objections. Duan Lingtian no longer addressed Yang Yunxiao as senior uncle. Instead, he addressed Yang Yunxiao as Heavenly Emperor. At the same time, Duan Lingtian's expression turned cold. Yang Yunxiao was prepared for Duan Lingtian's displeasure. His expression did not change at all as he said, "Since the transportation formation in the heavenly palace of the floating heaven has been destroyed, I'm afraid it'll take some time to rebuild it. If you and Hualao are in a hurry to return, you can look for a nearby transportation formation. If you're not in a hurry to return, you can wait for us to rebuild the transportation formation." Yang Yunxiao said. "We have something to attend to, so we're in a hurry to return," Duan Lingtian said indifferently. He nodded at the purple spike celestial emperor and bade her farewell before he left with Elder Hua. When Hualao left, his eyes were filled with resentment. Isn't Yang Yunxiao afraid that Lord Heavenly Emperor will come looking for him? How dare he protect his second disciple? Hualao said angrily. Even if Senior Feng Qingyang comes looking for him, he'll still say Kong Yu is the culprit and that the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor is only an accomplice. Duan Lingtian shook his head and said, "If Senior Feng Qingyang doesn't want to offend Yang Yunxiao, there's nothing he can do. However, if Senior Feng Qingyang insists on pursuing the matter, he'll just kill the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor to appease Senior Feng Qingyang. Moreover, he'll be giving face to Senior Feng Qingyang. At that time, Senior Feng Qingyang won't look for trouble with Yang Yunxiao, right? I have to say Yang Yunxiao is an old fox. He won't give up until he sees the coffin," Duan Lingtian said. Prior to this, Duan Lingtian had a good impression of Yang Yunxiao. After all, Yang Yunxiao had given him a treasure even though he could not figure out what it was. However, there was no doubt that the treasure was a treasure. After all, it was something that could transform the Seven Orifices exquisite sword from a prominent divine artifact to a supreme-grade divine artifact. Even though Huang Er said she was only confident, it did not affect the true value of the treasure. Although Duan Lingtian had a good impression of Yang Yunxiao before this, his impression of Yang Yunxiao was completely destroyed after what happened earlier. Forget it. Since Yang Yunxiao was unwilling to kill the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor, he had already returned the favor. Moreover, the reason Yang Yunxiao gave him the treasure was because he was the only true disciple of the Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang. Otherwise Yang Yunxiao would not be so friendly. I didn't expect young master to be so insightful. Hualao sighed. He did not think too much about Yang Yunxiao. However, after Duan Lingtian's reminder, he realized Yang Yunxiao was right. Yang Yunxiao, the Heavenly Emperor of the Floating Heaven, had decided to protect his disciple because the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven had not expressed his opinion. Once the Heavenly Emperor expressed his opinion, it would not be too late for Yang Yunxiao to kill his disciple. However, if the Heavenly Emperor did not express his opinion, he would not have to kill his disciple. At the very least, he would not offend the Heavenly Emperor openly. With this, Duan Lingtian and Hualao left the heavenly palace of the floating heaven and returned to the solitary destructive heaven through a transportation formation in another Devata realm. Meanwhile, the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor stood in the courtyard of Yang Yunxiao's residence. His eyes were bloodshot as he looked at the white-haired old man standing before him. Kong Fen, don't blame master. The old man was none other than Yang Yunxiao, the Heavenly Emperor of the floating heaven. He shook his head and said with a sigh, "I killed your son to save you. Since both of you have done this, it's only natural that I have to give the Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang an explanation. If you don't give me an explanation with the Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang's character, he'll definitely come knocking on your door. At that time I'll be in trouble as well. After killing your son, even if he comes knocking on my door, I'll still be able to give him an explanation. At the same time, I won't have a falling out with him. Of course, at that time, if he insists on killing you, even master won't be able to protect you." The old man continued to say, "For this reason, you have to consider whether you want to leave the heavenly palace or stay in the heavenly palace. If you leave the heavenly palace, you can either wait for the Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang to come knocking on your door and express his opinion on killing you. If he insists on killing you, there's no need for you to come back. If he doesn't insist on killing you, you can come back. At that time, everything will be fine. If you stay in the heavenly palace, your fate will depend on the Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang's decision. If I were you, I would choose to leave and wait for some time." Yang Yunxiao said. "Master." The Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor fell to his knees and rested his head on the ground. "Master, I was shocked when I saw you killing Er. I hope you won't blame me. At that time, I thought you would kill me after killing her to appease the young master of the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. I didn't expect you would do that to protect me. The almighty wind celestial emperor kowtowed 3 times after he finished speaking. After all, you've been with me for so many years. How can I just watch you die? Yang Yunxiao shook his head and sighed. Even a dog would develop feelings after being raised for a long time, let alone a human. Kongfen, have you made your decision? Do you want to leave the heavenly palace or stay? Yang Yunxiao asked. Master, I've decided to leave. I don't want to leave my fate in someone else's hands, even if that person is the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. The almighty wind celestial emperor said solemnly. A hint of bloodlust flashed in the depths of the almighty wind celestial emperor's eyes. He had to give his son an explanation for his son's death. Although Yang Yunxiao was the one who killed his son, he could not blame Yang Yunxiao for it since Yang Yunxiao had done it to save his life. Therefore he focused all his anger on one person. Duan Lingtian. Chapter 34-26. Duan Lingtian was unaware that Kong Fen, the almighty wind celestial emperor, had also left the heavenly palace of the floating heaven not long after he and Hua Lao returned to the solitary destructive heaven. Duan Lingtian was filled with frustration. He knew the reason Yang Yunxiao, the heavenly emperor of the floating heaven, had insisted on protecting the almighty wind celestial emperor in front of him because his master, Feng Qingyang, was not around. Naturally, if Feng Qingyang was not around and he was stronger than Yang Yunxiao would not have been able to protect the almighty wind celestial emperor. I'm still too weak. Perhaps in Yang Yunxiao's eyes, I'm no different from an ant, Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Indeed, Yang Yunxiao was right. Yang Yunxiao was polite to Duan Lingtian, addressing him as junior nephew. He even gave him gifts because of Feng Qingyang, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. Otherwise, with Duan Lingtian's current strength, Yang Yunxiao would not even bother to look at him. Due to the setback he had suffered in the heavenly palace of the floating heaven, Duan Lingtian did not hesitate to cultivate in his room after he returned to the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. As for his family, they were all cultivating in the small world within his body. Naturally, he cultivated using the heaven and earth spirit energy in his little world. Currently, he was no longer interested in the heaven and earth spirit energy in the Devata realms, even if the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven had an abundance of heaven and earth spirit energy. Currently, no matter how many divine crystals he had, they could not compare to the heaven and earth spirit energy in his little world. After all, the heaven and earth spirit energy in his little world was of a higher grade than the heaven and earth spirit energy in the realms of gods. Although the heaven and earth spirit energy in the divine crystals was abundant, it was still incomparable to the heaven and earth spirit energy in the Devata realms. While Duan Lingtian was immersed in his cultivation, his family in the small world within his body were also immersed in their cultivation. For Duan Lingtian's parents, Duan Ruffing and Li Ro, it was very good to stay in the small world inside their son's body. At least they didn't have to be separated from their son, but it was inconvenient for them to do some unspeakable things. However, if they wanted to do something that was hard to express, they would leave the small world in their son's body and go to another room. Duan Lingtian's residence in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven had plenty of rooms. Not only did Duan Ruffing and Li Ro have their own rooms, but even Feng Wudao and the others also had their own rooms. When I have time, I want to go back to my hometown. I haven't been back in a long time. Li Ro said to Duan Ruffing. Well, let's wait for a while. Duan Ruffing nodded. The Saint Province realm was only one of the many mundane realms in the world. Although the Saint Province realm had an extraordinary figure like Feng Qingyang who stood at the peak of the Devata realms, almost no one in the Saint Province realm knew about him. Brother Chiu, it's time to go to the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven to look for Huaner and little Tian. A beautiful and elegant woman hovered above the boundless ocean in the Saint Province realm as she spoke to the man next to her. Yes, it's time to look for them. Now that we've traveled all over the mundane realms, it's time to relax. Let's go to the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven to cultivate. Lian Qiu said with a smile, although the two of us won't be able to catch up to our daughter and son-in-law, it's still a pleasant surprise to be able to cultivate in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. Lian Qiu was a sword celestial from the heavenly sword mountain, a heaven-grade force in the solitary destructive heaven. In the solitary destructive heaven, almost all sword celestials worshipped Feng Qingyang, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, as their idol. Lian Qiu did not expect he would be related to Feng Qingyang, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, because of his daughter. As it turned out, his son-in-law was Feng Qingyang's true disciple. Moreover, Feng Qingyang was the only true disciple. Before Duan Lingtian and Huana left the purgatory battlefield and went to the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven to confirm their identities and look for Duan Ruffing, Li Ro, and the others, Duan Lingtian had returned to the Saint Province realm and told Lian Xiu and Du Xian about what had happened. Both of them were shocked when they heard about it. At that time, Duan Lingtian had wanted to bring both of them away from the mundane realm. However, both of them had taken a liking to the Saint Province realm and wanted to stay in the mundane realm for a while longer. They wanted to explore the mundane realm before leaving the Devata realms. Duan Lingtian respected their wishes. Before he left, he told both of them to go to the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven and look for Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor, if he had not returned yet. All of a sudden Lian Xiu seemed to have noticed something. His pupils shrank sharply and the smile on his face froze in an instant. Boom. Rumble. Along with a series of loud noises coming from the depths of the sea, Lian Xiu saw numerous demonic beasts floating up from the depths of the sea. All of them were dead. In the blink of an eye, the entire sea was covered with corpses of demonic beasts. The originally blue sea water had turned blood red at this moment. What's going on? Du Xian was shocked when she saw this. Someone killed them. It's a celestial emperor, Lian Xiu said solemnly. In the next moment, Lian Xiu seemed to have sensed something. With just a thought, he brought Du Xian to the other side of the sea. At this moment, two middle-aged men were flying toward them. With just a flip of their palms, energy flowed out of their palms like streaks of light into the sea. It was as though the energy had the ability to track people. Each streak of energy could easily kill countless demon beasts at the bottom of the sea until they ran out of energy. As soon as Lian Xiu and Du Xian appeared, the two middle-aged men noticed them as well. Their eyes were filled with killing intent as one of them made a move. Swoosh, swoosh. The flaming energy shot toward Lian Xiu and Du Xian like a meteor. The energy contained in the flaming energy was comparable to a celestial emperor. Although it was not as strong as a titled celestial emperor, it was close. However, such power was not enough to pose a threat to Lian Xiu. Swoosh. The sound of a sword whistling in the air rang in the air as Lian Xiu's celestial origin energy surged out of his body. In just a blink of an eye, his celestial origin energy merged with the profundity of laws and transformed into a huge sword that met the flaming energy. Boom. A loud explosion rang in the air as the huge sword destroyed the flaming energy and continued to charge toward the middle-aged man. Celestial emperors? At this moment, the middle-aged man discovered that the two middle-aged men were both celestial emperors. Moreover, the middle-aged man's strength was not inferior to his. However, Lian Xiu had not unleashed his full strength. Moreover, the flaming energy had consumed a portion of the flaming energy. For this reason, the middle-aged man managed to block the huge sword. Who are you? You're not from the Luo River sect, right? The middle-aged man was shocked to see two celestial emperors in this small mundane plane. He couldn't help but ask, what are you talking about? Luo River sect? Lian Xiu narrowed his eyes slightly. There were many heaven-grade forces in the Devata realms, and he could not remember most of them. However, there were some heaven-grade forces that were easy to remember. The Luo River sect was one of them. The Luo River sect was the strongest heaven-grade force in the Luo River heaven. The sect leader of the Luo River sect was the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven. Even the heavenly pool palace in the boundless heaven could not compare to the Luo River sect, let alone the heavenly sword mountain in the solitary destructive heaven. Why are the people from the Luo River sect in this mundane realm? Lian Xiu asked with a frown on his face. We're here on orders from the sect leader to slaughter all living beings in this mundane realm. The other middle-aged man said in a deep voice as he looked at Lian Xiu. Sect leader? Lian Xiu's expression changed drastically. He did not expect the middle-aged man was here on orders from the sect leader of the Luo River sect to slaughter all living beings in the Saint Province realm. Is the sect leader the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven? Lian Xiu asked. Yes, the sect leader of the Luo River heaven. The middle-aged man said indifferently, of course, we're here on orders from the saint girl of the Luo River sect. She's acting on behalf of the sect leader. Lian Xiu had heard that the saint girl of the Luo River sect was the biological daughter of Situ Zhu Qing, the sect leader of the Luo River sect and the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven. Why would the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven order the slaughter of all living beings in this mundane realm? A mere mundane realm shouldn't be able to offend her, right? Lian Xiu asked in a deep voice. Even if it was just a mundane realm, the slaughter of all living beings in this mundane realm was enough to make one tremble in fear. That's not what we know, the middle-aged man said. Lien Xiao nodded. Only the two of you from the Luo River sect came? A hint of killing intent flashed in the depths of Lien Xiao's eyes as he asked. If the two middle-aged men from the Luo River sect came, he would kill them and return to the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven to report the matter. After all, he knew this was not only the hometown of his son-in-law, but it was also the hometown of the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. For the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven to give such an order, could it be that she was targeting the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven? However, after thinking about it, he realized it was impossible. Before the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven was trapped in the Azura hell, the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven was already weaker than the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. Now that the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven had returned from the Azura hell, it seemed like the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven had already attained godhood. Under such circumstances, unless the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven had lost her mind, there was no way she would target the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. Of course not. The middle-aged man from the Luo River sect did not sense the killing intent in Lien Xiao's eyes. He shook his head and said, "We have more than 10 people led by 2 titled celestial emperors." Lien Xiao was shocked. Then he smiled and said, "I didn't expect the 2 of us to be so lucky. It's rare for us to come across a mundane realm that has offended the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven. Since the Luo River sect has something to do, I won't disturb you any longer." Chapter 34:27. As soon as Lien Xiao finished speaking, he took out the formation compass that Duan Ling Tian had given him and activated the formation to teleport to the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. This formation compass was given to Duan Ling Tian by Hua Lao. It could be used to teleport a person to a specific location in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. Moreover, once a person claimed the formation compass, the second person would not be able to use it even if they killed the first person, since it would self-destruct. Swoosh. Without waiting for the 2 middle-aged men's reply, Lien Xiao and his wife left the Saint Province realm through the formation compass. They did not hesitate at all. As soon as Lien Xiao discovered there were 2 titled celestial emperors with him, he felt a sense of crisis and was in a hurry to leave. Otherwise, if the titled celestial emperors came to kill them, it would be too late for regrets. Where are they? Shortly after Lien Xiao and Duan Ling Tian left, an old man appeared out of thin air. He glared at the 2 middle-aged men and asked in a deep voice, "Lord Xiao, they left using the formation compass." One of the middle-aged men said with a bitter smile on his face. "Lord Xiao, one of the 2 celestial emperors said they came to a mundane realm to relax. Since they're not from this mundane realm, there's no need to kill them," the other middle-aged man said. The old man nodded. "Just because he said so?" The old man looked at the middle-aged man as though he was looking at an idiot. "There are so many mundane realms. Why did he come to this mundane realm? In my opinion, the appearance of the 2 celestial emperors must have something to do with the mundane realm. It's most likely that this is their hometown. But why did they just run away? Didn't you say you're weaker than them?" In the old man's opinion, if the 2 celestial emperors were from this mundane realm, they should have killed the 2 celestial emperors, since they had told the 2 celestial emperors about their purpose in coming to this mundane realm. They must have left because we told them we were being led by 2 titled celestial emperors. The middle-aged man who spoke earlier was stunned for a moment before he said awkwardly, "Although that person is strong, I don't think he's as strong as a titled celestial emperor." The other middle-aged man said, "It seems that he left in such a hurry because he was worried that we would come over and kill him." The old man scoffed. Based on his words, it was clear he was one of the 2 titled celestial emperors from the Luo River sect. "Let's hurry up and slaughter all the living beings in this mundane realm as soon as possible. If those 2 find helpers to stop us in order to protect their homeland, we'll still be seen as incompetent by the Holy Maiden and the sect leader, even though we can go back and get reinforcements." The old man's expression darkened slightly as he said, "That's why we have to slaughter all of the living beings in this mundane plane before they call for reinforcements." As soon as the old man finished speaking, the 2 middle-aged men moved. Following that, the old man sent out a transmission to inform the remaining people of what had happened. Immediately, those people started killing even faster. During this period of time, the living beings in the sanctuary realm had suffered an unprecedented calamity. Wherever there was a dense population of living beings, there would be rivers of blood. The strength of the person who had attacked them was so strong that no one could resist him. Not to mention martial emperors, Even those extremely powerful individual celestials were vulnerable in front of this person who had slaughtered the living beings of the sanctuary realm for no reason. No matter how powerful the bodiless celestials were, they would be killed in an instant. Now that the celestial emperors from the Luo River Heaven's Luo River sect were slaughtering the living beings in the sanctuary realm, their efficiency had increased. After Lian Qiu and Du Xian left the sanctuary realm, they arrived at the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. When they arrived at a fixed location in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven, they immediately alerted the guards there. Who are you? This was the location where the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven's teleportation formation discs were located. Only those who possessed the teleportation formation discs of the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven were allowed to come here. For this reason, the people from the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven were very polite to Lian Qiu and Du Xian. Sir, is this the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven? Lian Qiu asked. Yes. The guard was a titled celestial emperor. He was puzzled when he heard Lian Qiu's question. Since Lian Qiu and Du Xian had arrived here through a teleportation formation, why would they ask such a stupid question? Sir, I'm looking for Duan Lingtian, the young master of the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. I have something urgent to attend to. Lian Qiu wanted to tell the guard his identity and ask him to bring him to Duan Lingtian. However, after thinking about it, he decided it would be a waste of time. For this reason, he decided to send Duan Lingtian a message instead. Duan Lingtian was originally cultivating when Lian Qiu's sudden message made him pause his cultivation. At the same time, his eyes were burning with rage. Damn the Luo River sect. He did not expect the Luo River sect in the Luo River Heaven would be so heartless as to send their people to the Saint Province realm and kill all living beings in the sanctuary realm. Naturally, he knew the reason for their actions. It was because he had killed the soul of the person who tried to possess Muyi. That person was the daughter of the Luo River sect's sect leader and the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven. She was also the twin sister of the saint girl of the Luo River sect. He had expected the Luo River sect to seek revenge sooner or later. However, he did not expect the Luo River sect to target the Saint Province realm and kill all living beings in the sanctuary realm. After all, the Saint Province realm was only a mundane realm. How could the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven give such an order? After a moment of anger, Duan Lingtian calmed down. The most important thing now is to stop them. I'll look for Senior Meng Luo. This time, Duan Lingtian did not look for Hua Lao. He sent a message to Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor, while he made his way to Lian Qiu and Du Xian. Young master. The titled celestial emperor who was standing near Lian Qiu and Du Xian hastily bowed and greeted Duan Lingtian when he saw Duan Lingtian. Since Duan Lingtian had stayed in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven for a long time, many people in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven were familiar with him. Everyone in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven knew there was a new young master in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. He was the only true disciple of their heavenly emperor. Although the heavenly emperor had not personally acknowledged this, there was no doubt Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor, had said so. After all, Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor, was the spokesperson of the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. Seniors, I'll bring you to my residence. I've prepared a courtyard and a room for both of you. I'll deal with the matter in the Saint Province realm. After bidding farewell to Lian Qiu and Du Xian, Duan Lingtian brought them to his residence. He had prepared a courtyard and a room for both of them. For the time being, Duan Lingtian did not plan to let Lian Qiu and Du Xian enter his little world. The divine tree of life and the 5 divine elements were Duan Lingtian's greatest secret. If the secret was exposed, even Feng Qingyang, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, might not be able to protect him. Naturally, Duan Lingtian trusted Lian Qiu and Du Xian. However, Huan had asked Duan Lingtian not to tell her parents about his little world for the time being. She was worried something might go wrong. Naturally, she trusted her mother unconditionally. However, she did not have much contact with her father. In fact, she had not even heard of him before this. Even if her mother trusted her father, she did not dare to risk brother Lingtian's secret. Before she fully trusted her father, she did not want her parents to enter brother Lingtian's little world. If anything happened to them, she would never forgive herself for the rest of her life. Since Huaner insisted, Duan Lingtian had no choice but to let her do as she pleased. His heart was filled with warmth when he saw how much Huaner cared about his safety. After all, the cultivation environment in his little world was comparable to a realm of gods. Juana must have known that her parents' cultivation speed would increase once they entered his lesser world, but she still chose to do so. The Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven is behind the Luo River sect. You must be careful. Before Duan Lingtian left, Lian Xiu reminded him solemnly. Don't worry, Senior Lian Xiu. I know what to do. Duan Lingtian nodded. After bidding farewell to Lian Xiu and his wife, Duan Lingtian stepped into the air and left his residence. At this moment, there was already someone waiting for him outside his residence. It was a burly man who looked like an iron tower. He was none other than Meng Luo, the Heavenly Savage Celestial Emperor, the strongest titled Celestial Emperor under Feng Qingyang, the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven. Senior Meng Luo, I'll have to trouble you with this matter. Duan Lingtian said to Meng Luo solemnly, we have to return to the Saint Province realm as soon as possible. If we're too late, I'm afraid all the saint spirits in the Saint Province realm will be killed. Young master, even if you don't let me handle this matter, I'm still responsible for it. The Saint Province realm is His Excellency the Heavenly Emperor's hometown. When I chat with His Excellency the Heavenly Emperor, he often mentions his hometown. It's not difficult for me to see how much His Excellency cares about his hometown. Since someone wants to destroy Lord Heavenly Emperor's hometown, I won't let them get away with it. After I kill these people, I'll make a trip to the Luo River Heaven and the Luo River sect. I'd like to know how the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven, a mere 7-star god of war, is so bold as to provoke Lord Heavenly Emperor. When Duan Lingtian returned to the Saint Province realm with Meng Luo, he did not show himself. Instead, he hid in Meng Luo's little world. He had no intention of showing himself in this matter. If he showed himself, it would implicate Muyi. If the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven went berserk, even Meng Luo, the Heavenly Savage Celestial Emperor, would not be able to protect him. Chapter 34:28. In the sky above a vast plain in the Saint Province realm, a burly figure appeared out of thin air. He wore a loose azure robe. His face was resolute and cold, and his tiger-like eyebrows gave him a dignified aura. At this moment, his eyes flickered with icy coldness. Swoosh! As the air rippled, the burly middle-aged man extended his divine sense. Then, as if he had turned into a bolt of lightning, he flew into the air. Meanwhile, an old man dressed in a blue robe landed in front of a steep mountain in the Saint Province realm. Who are you? Why have you come to the General Direction sect? Several disciples of the General Direction sect who were guarding the mountain gate asked the old man in a deep voice. I'm here to kill all of you. As soon as the old man finished speaking, a ray of light shot out of his eyes and pierced the space between the eyebrows of one of the disciples guarding the mountain gate. Everything happened in just a blink of an eye. When the remaining disciples regained their senses, the person who was killed had already fallen to the ground with a thud. At the same time, the disciples who regained their senses were horrified. Their eyes were filled with fear. Quick, report this to the sect leader. There's an enemy attack. Let's go. Let's report this to the sect leader. As the few of them shouted, they turned around and stepped into the air, flying towards the extremely high altitude of the steep mountain peak. Just one person is enough to report this. Seeing that the few of them were about to flee and report the matter, the old man's expression changed. He tapped his finger lightly in the air, and a few streaks of light shot through the air like shooting stars in the night sky. In the next moment, apart from the slowest disciple, the rest of the disciples who were faster were killed one after another. Without exception, all of them had their foreheads pierced. The young man who was the slowest among the disciples saw all of this. His face turned pale as he stood rooted to the ground, not daring to move at all. What a joke. These people were too strong and faster than him, but they were killed so easily. Even if he continued to flee, he would not be able to escape from the old man. Why are you still standing there? If you don't report this, you can accompany them as well. Upon hearing the old man's words, the young man's expression changed drastically. His figure flashed as he desperately rushed to report this matter. Although the General Direction sect was not considered a top force in the Saint Province realm, it was still a powerful force. There were many powerhouses who were close to becoming martial monarchs in the sect. When the high-ranking officials of the General Direction sect learned that someone had come to their sect to kill people, they were furious. However, when they personally took action and were all killed by the old man with a raise of his hand, the people who witnessed all of this with their own eyes were scared out of their wits. Who's that person? Even a martial monarch isn't as strong as him. Heavens! How could our General Direction sect defend such a powerhouse? Those who had witnessed this scene had a look on their faces. Just as they were about to scatter and flee in all directions and spread the news, causing everyone in the General Fang sect to be extremely terrified and flee. The old man struck once again. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Streaks of light flashed in the sky as though they had lives of their own. They chased after the people from the General Direction sect. In the end, everyone from the General Direction sect watched as a group of fellow sect members died in front of their own eyes. Then, their own consciousness gradually turned into nothingness. After killing everyone from the General Direction sect, the old man rose into the air with a satisfied smile on his face. Killing is a form of art. Those boorish fellows don't know how to enjoy life. The old man was one of the dozen or so celestial emperors from the Luo River sect. Although he was not a titled celestial emperor, his strength was close to one. He was ranked in the top 5 among the dozen or so people from the Luo River sect. Based on this, one could see how strong he was. After all, among the dozen or so people from the Luo River sect who had come to the Saint Province realm, there were 2 titled celestial emperors. As soon as the old man arrived at the General Direction sect's estate, he saw a tall figure looking at him calmly. There's a fish that escaped the net? Initially, the old man thought it was a fish that had escaped the net. His celestial origin energy surged as he prepared to make a move. However, when he realized that he was about to make a move, the other party was still looking at him with an indifferent expression. The gaze that was looking at him gave him a sense of familiarity. It was as though the middle-aged man was looking at a dead person. For a moment, the old man felt that something was amiss. If the middle-aged man was from the mundane realm, it was impossible for the middle-aged man to be so bold. Although the old man had yet to make a move, his aura was enough to make even the strongest bodiless celestial in the mundane realm tremble in fear. However, not only was the middle-aged man calm, but the middle-aged man was also looking at him as though he was a dead man. The people from the Luo River sect? The middle-aged man was none other than Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor, who had been searching for the old man. When Meng Luo arrived, the old man had just killed everyone from the General Direction sect. Meng Luo could not help but feel enraged by the old man's actions. On the other hand, Duan Lingtian, who was in Meng Luo's little world, was infuriated as well. He wished he could leave Meng Luo's little world and kill the old man. However, when he thought about how he could not expose himself and how he could not risk exposing himself, he held himself back. How did you know? Just as the old man felt that the burly middle-aged man before him was no ordinary man, he couldn't help but be stunned when he heard the other party's words. I want to see everyone from the Luo River sect in the mundane realm within a day. If there's even one person missing, you'll die. As soon as Meng Luo spoke, waves of destructive energy surged out of his body. In just a blink of an eye, it hovered above the old man's head before transforming into a gigantic palm that blotted out the sky. As soon as the gigantic palm appeared, the clouds and mist in the sky retreated for hundreds of miles. From this, one could see how terrifying the gigantic palm was. Although the gigantic palm did not land on the old man, the celestial origin energy it contained that was comparable to a 10-direction celestial emperor and 3 profundities from the law of destruction caused the old man's expression to change drastically. Even in the Luo River sect there were only a few such powerhouses. Sir, who are you? The old man asked in a trembling voice. He subconsciously retracted the celestial origin energy that was originally dissipating from his body. This was because he knew that in front of such a powerhouse, there was no difference whether he resisted or not. If Meng Luo wanted to kill him, it would only take a blink of an eye. I'm Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor from the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. Meng Luo replied indifferently. Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor? The old man's eyes widened when he heard Meng Luo's words. He did not expect Meng Luo to be from the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. After witnessing Meng Luo's strength, it was not difficult for him to guess Meng Luo was a titled celestial emperor. He did not expect Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor. Heavens! In the Luo River sect, even the Saint Girl and the Supreme Elders would not be a match for Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor. In the Luo River sect, only the sect leader was capable of defeating Meng Luo. Lord Meng Luo, may I know why you're looking for us? The old man asked in a trembling voice. At this moment, an ominous feeling rose in his heart. Could Meng Luo be the reinforcements the 2 celestial emperors had asked for? Although the old man had not seen the male and female celestial emperors, he knew the 2 celestial emperors had left the mundane realm in a hurry after learning about their actions. At that time, the 2 celestial emperors who were in charge of the Luo River sect were from the mundane realm. After all, the two celestial emperors had left the mundane realm to find reinforcements to stop them. However, that was only a guess. They did not expect the reinforcements to be the heavenly savage celestial emperor from the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor, was a famous figure in the Devata realms. He was famous not only because of his strength but also because he was the closest subordinate of Feng Qingyang, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. In fact, Feng Qingyang had even killed a heavenly emperor for Meng Luo. "I don't have the patience to wait," Meng Luo said impatiently, ignoring the old man's words. The old man did not dare to hesitate any longer. He hurriedly sent a voice transmission to the others and told them Meng Luo from the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven had come. Upon hearing the old man's words, the remaining dozen or so people were frightened out of their wits. What? Meng Luo? The heavenly savage celestial emperor from the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven? Heavens? Who are those two people? How did they manage to get reinforcements like Meng Luo? Back then, heavenly emperor Feng Qingyang from the solitary destructive heaven killed a heavenly emperor for Meng Luo. In terms of strength, Meng Luo is on par with the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven. We can't go. What if he kills us if we go? After learning that Meng Luo had asked them to go to the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven, none of them wanted to go. Upon hearing their words, the old man regretted telling them the truth. When he thought about how Meng Luo would kill him if he did not show up, he hurriedly sent a voice transmission to the others and said, "I'm sorry. I've already told Lord Meng Luo your names. Lord Meng Luo has said that if any of you don't show up, he'll hunt you down and kill you even if you leave the Luo River heaven and the Luo River sect. Lord Meng Luo has also said that he won't kill you." As soon as the old man finished speaking, the group of people immediately stopped killing and moved toward the old man. In less than half a day, a group of people had gathered together with the old man and appeared in front of Meng Luo. "Lord Meng Luo." The group of people including the old man bowed at Meng Luo. Their bodies were stiff and their voices were trembling slightly. In the Hall of Literature. Chapter 34-29. Are there two titled celestial emperors among you? Duanling Tian, who was in Meng Luo's little world, glared at the group of celestial emperors from the Luo River heaven. Meanwhile, Meng Luo looked at the group of celestial emperors indifferently. "Lord Meng Luo." An old man and a middle-aged man stepped forward and introduced themselves. One of them was Wuxia, the Jianghu celestial emperor, and the other was Chang'e, the Fengmi celestial emperor. As soon as the two of them stepped forward and looked at Meng Luo respectfully, a destructive aura surged out of Meng Luo's body. The two titled celestial emperors' expressions changed drastically as the destructive aura surged out of Meng Luo's body. The destructive aura seemed to have transformed into a gigantic black beast that opened its mouth and devoured the two titled celestial emperors. In the next moment, the two titled celestial emperors fell silent. When the destructive aura dissipated, the two titled celestial emperors were nowhere to be seen. Two spatial rings fell from the sky. The two titled celestial emperors from the Luo River sect had died in just a blink of an eye. Both of them were ordinary titled celestial emperors. They were like 3-year-old children in front of a titled celestial emperor like Meng Luo. Lord Meng Luo. Lord Meng Luo, please spare our lives. We were only following orders. Lord Meng Luo, please spare our lives. The remaining immortal emperors all knelt down with expressions of fear on their faces. Many of them silently cursed the person who told them to come over. Didn't Meng Luo say that as long as they came he wouldn't kill them? The two strongest titled celestial emperors among them were killed by Meng Luo in just a blink of an eye. They had heard of Meng Luo's strength in the past, but hearing about it and witnessing it with their own eyes were two completely different concepts. After witnessing Meng Luo's terrifying strength with their own eyes, as well as the scene of Meng Luo calmly killing people, they felt a chill rush from the soles of their feet to their heads, causing them to shudder. "Do you know why I'm here?" Meng Luo asked indifferently as he looked at the kneeling celestial emperors. The group of celestial emperors fell silent upon hearing Meng Luo's words. They immediately thought of the two titled celestial emperors who had sent the message to Meng Luo. It seemed like Meng Luo had a close relationship with them for him to stand up for them. Now, they only thought that as long as they could return, they would never return to the mundane plane again. Unless the sect leader of the Luo River sect, the heavenly emperor of the Luo River sect, stepped forward to suppress Meng Luo and prevent him from meddling in other people's business. Lord Meng Luo. In the end, one of them mustered up his courage and said, "We came to the mundane realm under orders from our Luo River sect's saint girl. The saintess said that this was the order of the hierarch. I'm sure Lord Meng Luo is aware that the sect leader of our Luo River sect is the Heavenly Emperor of our Luo River Heaven. When he mentioned the Heavenly Empress of the Luo River Heavenly Emperor, he felt that Meng Luo would have some misgivings and retreat. The Luo River Celestial Emperor? Meng Luo looked at the man meaningfully before he said, "Do you think I'll be frightened by you if you mention the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven?" The man's expression changed drastically when he heard Meng Luo's words. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead as he said, "I wouldn't dare. Lord Meng Luo, that's not what I meant. I really didn't mean that." Meng Luo continued to say, "The reason I'm here is because I received news that the Luo River sect is planning to massacre all living beings in the St. Province realm." Meng Luo continued, "Do you know why I, Meng Luo, am standing up for you?" Meng Luo glanced at the group of people in front of him and asked meaningfully, "What do you think?" Seeing that the group of people had lowered their heads and were trembling in fear, Meng Luo continued to say, "It's because the St. Province realm is the hometown of the Heavenly Emperor of the solitary destructive heaven." Upon hearing Meng Luo's words, the group of celestial emperors from the Luo River sect who were still trembling in fear froze in place. When they heard Meng Luo's words, their minds froze for a moment. The mundane realm they were in was the hometown of Feng Qingyang, the Heavenly Emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. Moreover, it was the hometown of Feng Qingyang, the Heavenly Emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. In an instant, when their minds came back to life, they felt goosebumps rising on every inch of their bodies, and their scalps went numb. Heavens! They were planning to massacre all living beings in the hometown of Feng Qingyang, the Heavenly Emperor of the solitary destructive heaven? Meng Luo said coldly, "Only one of you can return to the Luo River sect to report the news. If anyone dares to flee, I'll make a move on them." Meng Luo said calmly as he looked at the remaining celestial emperors from the Luo River sect coldly. As soon as Meng Luo finished speaking, the expressions of the celestial emperors changed drastically. Without waiting for Meng Luo to speak, the celestial emperors began to kill each other. In the beginning, most of them joined forces to deal with the strongest celestial emperors from the solitary destructive heaven. The second and third strongest celestial emperors from the solitary destructive heaven were also killed. In the end, only one celestial emperor was left alive. He was severely injured, but fortunately he survived. His eyes and face were filled with joy. "What? Lord Meng Luo?" The celestial emperor looked at Meng Luo anxiously and asked, "Can I leave now?" "You can leave now." Meng Luo said indifferently, "Send the news to the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven." "Thank you, Lord Meng Luo." Upon hearing Meng Luo's words, the celestial emperor left with a relieved expression on his face. After the celestial emperor left, Duan Lingtian appeared with an unsightly expression on his face. "Young master, we'll have to wait for Lord Heavenly Emperor's return before we can make a decision. However, I'm sure the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven won't dare to act recklessly in the St. Province realm." Meng Luo said to Duan Lingtian. "All right." Duan Lingtian nodded. Then he said to Meng Luo, "Senior Meng Luo, you can return for now. I want to look around the St. Province realm by myself." "Young master, I have nothing else to do, so I'll follow you. It's just as well that I haven't seen Lord Heavenly Emperor's hometown," Meng Luo said with a smile. Naturally, Meng Luo stayed to ensure Duan Lingtian's safety. After all, he had learned from Duan Lingtian that the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven had something to do with Duan Lingtian. After all, Duan Lingtian had killed the daughter of the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven. For this reason, Meng Luo did not dare to be careless. If the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven went crazy and came to the St. Province realm, would Meng Luo not be in danger? Duan Lingtian did not stop Meng Luo from staying. Instead, he began to think about his hometown and the 10 great dynasties. Since they haven't left, it means they haven't killed all the living beings in the St. Province realm. The 10 great dynasties are located in a remote area, so they shouldn't have gone there yet. Naturally, Duan Lingtian knew he was just trying to comfort himself. For celestial emperors from the Luo River sect, the St. Province realm was not a remote place. In fact, even those who stood at the peak of the St. Province realm were no different from ordinary people in the St. Province realm. To celestial emperors, even the strongest bodiless celestial in the St. Province realm was like an ant that could not withstand a single blow. "I hope they're all right. I hope they're all right." Although the people who were important to him were no longer in his hometown in the St. Province realm, and most of his old friends had passed away with the passage of time, they were still alive. However, the descendants of his old friends were still here. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian brought Meng Luo back to the 10 great dynasties. The celestial emperor from the Luo River sect who had escaped from Meng Luo's clutches finally returned to the Luo River Heaven. In fact, he did not want to return. However, his family and friends were all in the Luo River sect. Therefore he could not leave alone. Therefore he had no choice but to return. Lord Saint Girl. The celestial emperor who had survived was a middle-aged man dressed in a long green robe. His face was as fair as jade, but his expression was unsightly at this moment. A hint of fear could be seen in his eyes as well. What happened? Feng Jianyu, the saint girl of the Luo River sect and the biological daughter of Situ Zhu Qing, the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven, realized something was amiss when she saw the expression on the middle-aged man's face. Her expression turned slightly serious. Lord Saint Girl, apart from me, everyone who went to the Saint Province realm is dead, including Lord Chang'e and Lord Yuxiu. The middle-aged man bowed as he reported to Feng Jianyu. His body trembled slightly as he lowered his head. What? Feng Jianyu's expression changed drastically. How's that possible? All of you are celestial emperors, and 2 of you are even titled celestial emperors. How could all of you die in a mundane realm? What the hell happened? Feng Jianyu's expression darkened. She did not expect only one of the people she had sent to the mundane realm would return alive. She could not figure it out. It was just a mundane plane. Could it be that there were scourges and ferocious beasts in there? Lord Saint Girl, Lord Meng Luo from the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven came to the mundane realm and stopped us. The middle-aged man did not dare to be negligent. He quickly told Feng Jianyu about Meng Luo's appearance and Meng Luo's words. Feng Jianyu was shocked when she heard the middle-aged man's words. Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor, intervened? Moreover, he said the Saint Province realm is the hometown of Feng Qingyang, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven? Since Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor, had intervened, it was already a miracle that even one of the people she had sent to the mundane realm returned alive. Feng Jianyu knew this very well. Otherwise, she was not confident she would be able to escape unscathed from Meng Luo. However, she did not expect this to happen. She did not expect the Saint Province realm to be the hometown of Feng Qingyang, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. How could there be such a coincidence in this world? Chapter 34:30. Although the Guiyao planet was some distance away from the Tailao planet, there was no planet with a galaxy teleporter that was closest to the Guiyao planet. Therefore, the group from the Lightning Sword sect left the Tailao planet directly and traveled through the stars towards the Guiyao planet. Along the way, Zhou Donghuang could see a few planets shining brightly under the light of the central star of the Hengliu galaxy. It was a dazzling sight. The Guiyao planet is just ahead. As the voice of the Lightning Sword sect's Yu Yuqing sounded, Zhou Donghuang looked up instinctively and saw a grayish-green planet with a portion of blue in the background. Zhou Donghuang knew clearly. The grayish-green was the land and rivers of this planet, and the blue was probably the sea of this planet. The latter was not as large as the former. Also, the atmosphere surrounding this planet was not white but grayish-brown, and it looked a little strange. So many people. As he got closer, Zhou Donghuang heard a few scattered cries of surprise. Only then did he realize that there were quite a few people standing in groups all over the planet as they got closer. It was obvious that these people were from the other sects of the Alliance. There are a total of 52 sects in the Alliance. This time, there are more than 2,000 Dharma adepts participating in the Alliance hunt. These people add up to less than 1,000 people, and it's obvious that many have not arrived. He Mingshi stood beside Zhou Donghuang and spoke softly to him. Tomorrow is the Alliance hunt, and those who are not here should be here today. De Zhuang said. Little brother. He Mingshi smiled at Zhou Donghuang. Hurry up and see if your little lover is here yet. I'm not familiar with the Jihan sect, so I can't recognize you. Although the Jihan sect was a sect with more females than males, there were many other sects in the alliance of the Hengliu galaxy that were also more females than males. There was even a sect that only accepted female disciples. Faced with He Mingshi's teasing, Zhou Donghuang looked up helplessly and scanned the 1,000 people in front of him, but he did not find Luo Qinghan. It was obvious that Luo Qinghan had not arrived yet. Or perhaps Luo Qinghan had already arrived, but was on the other side of the Guiyao planet. Ah! Sect leader Yu, the Lightning Sword sect, is here early as well? Zhou Donghuang and the rest had just stopped in the sky near the Guiyao planet when the leader of the group closest to them smiled and greeted the Lightning Sword sect leader, Yu Yuqing, from afar. He was a middle-aged man with a curly beard who was dressed in a dark golden robe. Yu Yuqing stood at the very front of the group from the Lightning Sword sect and was extremely eye-catching. Sect leader Zhang. Yu Yuqing looked at the other party and smiled. Your Yunhua sect is ahead of our Lightning Sword sect again. We just arrived as well. The golden-robed middle-aged man shook his head and smiled. Then, his gaze instinctively landed on the group of people behind Yu Yuqing. Without any hesitation he asked, "Sect leader Yu, I heard that your sect has produced a genius at the mid-Dharma stage who has mastered Dharmic possession. This time he should be here, right?" Because Yu Yuqing was some distance away from the golden-robed middle-aged man, when the man spoke, his voice was heard by the group of people behind him and the Lightning Sword sect. The group from the Lightning Sword sect was still fine. Only a few people instinctively looked at Zhou Donghuang and whispered among themselves. That Yunhua sect leader probably doesn't know. Junior brother Donghuang is now at the late Dharma stage. I really didn't expect junior brother Donghuang to be so famous that even the Yunhua sect, which is so far away from the Lightning Sword sect, knows of his existence. When the Thunder Knife sect took in Han Yujing, the so-called genius of the Tailao planet, the news has spread to almost half of the Hunliu galaxy. Our Lightning Sword sect's Zhou Donghuang defeated Han Yujing in one blow. Naturally, this news could not be kept a secret. I'm afraid that all the major sects of the Alliance have heard of it. Unlike the group of Dharma disciples from the Lightning Sword sect, who had a clear understanding of Zhou Donghuang's abilities, the group of Dharma disciples from the Yunhua sect looked at the group from the Lightning Sword sect with uncertainty in their eyes. Mid-Dharma stage, mastering Dharmic possession? You must be joking. I also think that it's impossible. Even for ultimate Dharma adepts, there are not many who can master Dharmic possession. But that's what the rumors say. I think it's fake news. Many rumors become more and more ridiculous as they spread. Obviously, the group of Dharma disciples from the Yunhua sect did not believe that there was someone in the Lightning Sword sect who could master Dharmic possession at the mid-Dharma stage. Faced with the Yunhua sect leader's question, Yu Yuqing laughed heartily. "Sect leader Zhang, you're really well informed. Little junior brother, that's the Yunhua sect leader Zhang Yuanhan," He Mingshi said to Zhou Donghuang. "The Yunhua sect has always had a good relationship with our Lightning Sword sect. Under the Yunhua sect leader Zhang Yuanhan, there's also a mid-Dharma adept who is quite powerful. It's said that the Yunhua sect is second only to his mid-Dharma adept and could not even withstand one blow from him. Speak of the devil." Almost at the same time as He Mingshi's words, a tall and burly young man dressed in a brocade robe stepped out from behind the Yunhua sect leader, Zhang Yuanhan. He bowed to Yu Yuqing and said, "Yuan Dong greets senior uncle Yu." "I was talking about him just now," He Mingshi said to Zhou Donghuang. At this time He Mingshi said to Zhou Donghuang, "His Dharma power is also very strong. Although it has not reached the level of Dharma power possession, it is very close." Faced with Yuan Dong's bow, Yu Yuqing laughed. "Junior Yuan Dong, you haven't reached the late Dharma stage yet, have you?" "Senior uncle Yu, I plan to reach the late Dharma stage after this alliance hunt," Yuan Dong said in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. "It looks like you can break through now, but you haven't done so yet." Yu Yuqing looked at Yuan Dong deeply. Similar situations were not rare in the various large sects of the Alliance. If one did not increase their level of training and relied on their current Dharma power to participate in the Alliance hunt, they would undoubtedly have a greater advantage and it would be easier to gain points. "Junior Yuan Dong, are you planning to make it to the top 10 this time?" Yu Yuqing asked. "I hope so." As Yuan Dong finished speaking, he looked at Yu Yuqing with a burning gaze and said, "Senior uncle Yu, I know that I may not be a match for the genius disciple of your esteemed sect who has mastered the Dharmic possession technique at the mid-Dharma stage, but I still want to spar with him before the Alliance hunt. Would that be convenient?" As he finished speaking he added, "My Dharma power has recently reached a bottleneck, and it is difficult for me to improve further and master the Dharmic possession technique. I want to see if I can be inspired by sparring with the genius disciple of your esteemed sect." As soon as Yuan Dong opened his mouth, he intended to challenge Zhou Donghuang. However, after hearing Yuan Dong's words, Yu Yuqing shook his head. "Junior Yuan Dong, forget it." "Senior uncle Yu," Yuan Dong said seriously. "I just want to see his ability. Even if I am defeated by him in one move, I will accept it." "Junior Yuan Dong, he has already reached the late Dharma stage." Yu Yuqing said, "It is meaningless for you to spar with him." As soon as Yu Yuqing said this, the Yunhua sect disciples who had wanted to mock the genius disciple of the Lightning Sword sect, Zhou Donghuang, immediately shut their mouths. Yuan Dong's expression froze for a moment, then he smiled bitterly and sighed. "He is more daring than I am." As soon as he finished speaking, he retreated. "Sect leader Yu, sect leader Zhang." At this time another group of people approached from afar. The leader was an old man in a white robe with white hair and white eyebrows. He smiled and greeted Yu Yuqing and Zhang Yuanhan. "Sect leader Huang." Yu Yuqing and Zhang Yuanhan quickly responded to the old man. At this time He Mengshi introduced him to Zhou Donghuang and De Zhuang, who were beside her. This is the sect leader of the Tiansong sect, Huang Chuanqiu. Sect leader Yu, the mid-Dharma stage genius disciple of your lightning sword sect, is now famous throughout the entire Honglio galaxy. This time he should be here, right? As Huang Chuanqiu led the group of people from the Tiansong sect closer, he looked at Yu Yuqing. From his words, it was obvious that he was interested in Zhou Donghuang. Little junior brother, I didn't lie to you, right? Now you're a famous person in the entire Honglio galaxy. Even within the two transcendental forces, I'm afraid that your name is circulating. He Mengshi smiled and said, that little lover of yours must have heard of your deeds. This is strange, why hasn't she come to look for you? When Zhou Donghuang heard He Mengshi's words, he was speechless. The Yunhua sect leader, Zhang Yuanhan, smiled and said to the Tiansong sect leader Huang Chuanqiu, Sect leader Huang, that genius disciple of the lightning sword sect has now entered the late Dharma stage. Just now my disciple Yuan Dong wanted to spar with him, but when he found out that he had already entered the late Dharma stage, he could only give up. From what I know, your last disciple Mo Tian has already trained his Dharma power to the point of Dharma possession at the late Dharma stage. I wonder, compared to that genius disciple of the lightning sword sect, who is stronger and who is weaker? As he spoke, Zhang Yuanhan's eyes revealed a hint of curiosity. Sect leader Zhang, fists and feet have no eyes. The alliance hunt is about to begin tomorrow, and sparring at this time is too risky. Even if you want to see my stupid disciple spar with that genius disciple of the lightning sword sect, you should wait until the alliance hunt is over. Huang Chuanqiu shook his head and said, if that's the case, I'll wait and see. Regarding Huang Chuanqiu's response, Zhang Yuanhan was not surprised. This was because he already knew that the Tiansong sect leader was famous for being cautious. His last disciple Mo Tian was the trump card of the Tiansong sect in this alliance hunt. Naturally, he would not be willing to let him spar with anyone at this time. Not to mention that he might not be able to win. Even if he won, he would have to pay a heavy price. Little junior brother, this last disciple of the Tiansong sect leader, Mo Tian, has mastered the Dharma possession technique at the late Dharma stage. Based on the previous alliance hunts, it's almost certain that he will make it into the top 10 of this year's alliance hunt, He Mengshi said to Zhou Donghuang. He Mengshi said to Zhou Donghuang, I just don't know what rank he will get. Chapter 34-32. The 10 great dynasties could only be considered a remote place in the sanctuary realm. Their forces were also the weakest in the sanctuary realm. Let alone the celestial emperors who stood at the peak of the Devata realms. Even a bodiless celestial who stood at the peak of the Saint Province realm could easily annihilate the 10 great dynasties. It's gone? It's all gone? Duan Lingtian was in a daze when he heard this. Not long ago he had returned to the 10 great dynasties with Huan. They had traveled from Fresh Breeze Town to Aurora City, and then to other places he had visited. There were traces of him everywhere, and there were legends of him everywhere. Not only that, but there were also descendants of his old friends everywhere. But now all of this was gone. The Luo River sect, the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven. Flames of fury burned in Duan Lingtian's eyes. The heavenly emperor of a Devata realm actually wanted to slaughter the entire Saint Province realm and the people from the 4 great dynasties in his hometown for his own selfish desires. After a long while, Duan Lingtian took a deep breath before he regained his senses. However, his expression was still unsightly as he muttered to himself, if little Fei Tianwu and my parents find out about this, they'll definitely be devastated. Forget it, I'll just tell them. Initially, Duan Lingtian had planned to keep it a secret from Li Fei and the others. However, since they would find out about this sooner or later, there was no need to keep it a secret from them. When Duan Lingtian told Li Fei and the others about this matter, Li Fei and the others were infuriated. They did not expect the heavenly emperor of a Devata realm would do such a thing. Tian, I know you want to seek revenge, but before you're strong enough, it's best not to expose yourself. Moreover, I'm afraid the heavenly emperor Feng Qingyang won't let this matter rest. Duan Ruffing said solemnly to Duan Lingtian. He was afraid that his son would run to the Luo River heavenly emperor to settle the score. However, as soon as Duan Rufeng finished speaking, he remembered his son's experience in the Devata realms was much more profound than his. Therefore, he did not need to tell his son about this since he was sure his son would know. Father, I know what to do. Don't worry. Duan Lingtian said. Big brother Lingtian, let's go to the Green Wave Han mansion and take a look. Han Xuanai said to Duan Lingtian with a worried expression on her face. Her hometown was also in the Saint Province realm, and her home in the St. Province realm was the Greenwave Han Mansion. Hundreds of years had passed, and she didn't know how her family was doing. However, she couldn't help but worry. All right. Upon hearing Han Xuanai's words, Duan Lingtian finally regained his senses. Xuanai's home was not in the 10 great dynasties. For this reason, he decided to make his way to the Greenwave Han Mansion based on his memories. The Greenwave Han Mansion was Xuanai's home, and her family was there as well. Due to the high cultivation base of Xuanai's family, as long as there were no accidents, they would be able to live forever. However, when Duan Lingtian arrived at the Greenwave Han Mansion, he discovered that Xuanai's home was destroyed as well. Xuanai's home in the Greenwave Han Mansion was also destroyed. No. Impossible. This is impossible. Above the ruined Greenwave Han Mansion, Xuanai stared at the scene in front of her in disbelief. A hint of pain could be seen in her eyes. Her home was gone. Most likely her family was gone as well. Brother Lingtian. Han Xuanai threw herself into Duan Lingtian's arms and cried bitterly. Duan Lingtian could clearly feel her tears on his back. He quickly reached out and patted her back. Xuanai, don't worry. It's been hundreds of years, they're no longer in the Greenwave Han Mansion. Duan Lingtian was comforting Han Xuanai as well. Even he felt that Xuanai's family was most likely dead. At this moment, the anger he felt towards Situ Zhuqing, the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven, rose even higher. Although Duan Lingtian had become a celestial emperor, he did not think he was very strong even with the help of the 5 divine elements. There were too many powerhouses in this world. When he was in the mundane realm, he had learned about the realms of gods. Moreover, he knew the people from the realms of gods were much stronger than celestials from the Devata realms. Yun Qingyan, the young master of the Yun clan in the divine offering land, was able to send Feng Qingyang, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, into the Azura Hell, one of the 7 deadliest places in the Devata realms. Based on this, one could easily imagine how strong the people from the realms of gods were. Yun Qingyan was just a servant. Xuanai, don't worry. If anything happens to them, I'll make sure you kill the culprit. Duan Lingtian said to Han Xuanai in a deep voice. This was his promise to Han Xuanai. Meng Luo was the only one present. Moreover, he knew how powerful Duan Lingtian was. Therefore, he did not think Duan Lingtian was making empty promises. If other titled celestial emperors were present, they would have burst out laughing upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words. Although the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven was considered ordinary among heavenly emperors, she was still a 7-star god of war. She ruled over her own territory in the 9 Serenities battlefield. How could an ordinary celestial emperor like Duan Lingtian dare to say he wanted to capture and kill her? How laughable. Senior Meng Luo. After comforting Han Xuanai, Duan Lingtian looked at Meng Luo and asked, since the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven knows you're involved in this matter and that this is Senior Feng Qingyang's hometown, I'm sure she won't dare to act rashly, right? Even if she's 10 times braver, she won't dare to act rashly. Meng Luo said confidently. Upon hearing Meng Luo's words, Duan Lingtian sighed in relief. Although most of his friends and descendants were dead, the St. Province realm was still his second hometown. Naturally, he did not want to see any harm befall the St. Province realm. With that, Duan Lingtian and Meng Luo returned to the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven in the solitary destructive heaven. After returning to the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven, Duan Lingtian discovered his family and friends in his little world were all focused on their cultivation. It was clear the ordeal in the St. Province realm had put a lot of pressure on them. In the past, they thought they would be invincible in the mundane realms even if their strength was mediocre in the Devata realms. However, when the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven sent her men to slaughter the people in the St. Province realm, they realized they would not be completely safe even if they left the Devata realms and returned to the mundane realms. After all, a celestial emperor was more than enough to take their lives. This made them feel pressured. For this reason, they worked even harder in their cultivation. At this time, even Mu Yi, under the influence of the crowd, began to cultivate as if she was a master. It seems like it won't take long for them to become celestial lords or even celestial emperors. After taking a look at the situation in his little world, Duan Lingtian began to focus on his cultivation in his residence. Currently he was under a lot of pressure and was shouldering a heavy burden. Situ Zhuqing, the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven. Yang Yunxiao, the heavenly emperor of the floating heaven. He wanted to kill Yang Yunxiao. Yang Yunxiao wanted to force Yang Yunxiao to hand over Kong Yuyi's father, the almighty Wind Celestial Emperor. Every now and then Huolao would send celestial pills and celestial fruits to Duan Lingtian. However, these things were not valuable in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. After all, Feng Qingyang, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, had never accepted a formal disciple before. As for the others, they might have searched for celestial pills and celestial fruits for their disciples. However, those were their personal belongings. Moreover, there was a limit to the number of celestial pills and celestial fruits. They would not be so generous as to give them to Duan Lingtian. However, when Huolao learned about the celestial pills and celestial fruits, he would personally ask for them. Of course, as an equivalent exchange, Elder Hua also gave them many items of equal value. With this, Duan Lingtian, his family and friends cultivated at a shocking speed. Apart from that, Duan Lingtian did not forget to further comprehend the law of space with the help of the Supreme Powerhouse Divinity. With the Supreme Powerhouse Divinity, his speed of comprehending the law of space was ridiculously fast. Time flew by. In just a blink of an eye, more than 200 years had passed. The heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven was still the same as it was 200 years ago. 200 years was not a long time for the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven and the celestials in the Devata realms. Young master. Duan Lingtian, who was cultivating in his room, heard Huolao's voice. He immediately stopped cultivating and walked out of his room. Huolao, what's the matter? Over the past 300 years, Huolao had only been diligent in the first 100 years. After that, he had become less and less frequent. After all, the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven had a limited supply of celestial pills and celestial fruits. Huolao had already traded away most of the celestial pills and celestial fruits. Later on, even though Huolao had gone out to search for celestial pills and celestial fruits, there were still fewer and fewer of them. Young master, Lord Heavenly Emperor has returned, Huolao said with a smile when he saw Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian had thought Huolao had come to give him celestial pills and celestial fruits. He did not expect such a reply from Huolao. Duan Lingtian was stunned for a moment before an expression of joy appeared on his face. His eyes shone brightly as he asked, Senior Feng Qingyang has returned from the Azura Hell? That's right. Huolao nodded with a smile on his face. Lord Heavenly Emperor has returned today. When he found out you've returned to the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven, he immediately asked me to bring you to him. Huolao's tone was filled with respect when he mentioned the heavenly emperor. Let's go. Duan Lingtian's eyes were filled with anticipation as he followed Huolao. Senior Feng Qingyang. He was finally going to meet Senior Feng Qingyang. Ever since Duan Lingtian had arrived in the Devata realm and learned Feng Qingyang had not perished in the Azura Hell, he had been looking forward to meeting Senior Feng Qingyang. Now the day had finally arrived. Chapter 34-33. Feng Qingyang was the first-generation successor of the seven absolute sects Fog Rain progeny in the Saint Province realm. Duan Lingtian was the second-generation successor. When Duan Lingtian was in the Saint Province realm, he had accidentally obtained Feng Qingyang's legacy and mastered the Sovereign Heart Sword. Since then, his journey in the Saint Province realm had been smooth sailing. It could be said that the reason Duan Lingtian became so powerful was mostly due to the Sovereign Heart Sword that he mastered. When Duan Lingtian was still in the Saint Province realm, he had wondered more than once if he would be able to meet Feng Qingyang, who was his master even though they were not officially master and disciple. When he arrived at the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven and obtained the approval of Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor, he knew it was only a matter of time before he met Senior Feng Qingyang. However, he did not expect he would wait for more than 200 years. For most celestials in the Devata realms, 200 years was just a blink of an eye. However, for Duan Lingtian, these 200 years were almost half of his life. After all, he was only slightly over 500 years old. Young master, when you were in the mundane realm, Lord Heavenly Emperor witnessed your heavenly tribulation through the formation mirror image. At that time I had just left you. When Huolao brought Duan Lingtian to meet Feng Qingyang, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, he could not help but sigh. I didn't expect 500 years would pass in just a blink of an eye. Senior Feng Qingyang witnessed my heavenly tribulation through the formation mirror image? Duan Lingtian was stunned. This was his first time hearing Huolao mention this. He did not expect Senior Feng Qingyang had been watching him for so long. Back then, Lord Heavenly Emperor, Kuang Ling, and the sword soul of Lord Heavenly Emperor's solitary destructive flaming heavenly sword witnessed your heavenly tribulation. Huolao sighed. Duan Lingtian had learned from Huolao that Kuang Ling, the sword soul of the Nirvana flaming heavenly sword, had perished because he was a servant of the Yun family's young master, Yun Qingyan. The divine weapon used by Yun Qingyan's servant was of a higher grade than the solitary destructive flaming sky sword. The weapon's soul was also stronger, so it killed Kuang Ling instantly. Back then, the reason why Hua Lao had suddenly disappeared was because Senior Feng Qingyang had ordered the sword soul of his divine artifact, solitary extinguishing flaming heavenly sword, to take Hua Lao away. His original intention was to not let the existence of Hua Lao and the Seven Treasures' exquisite pagoda make him too reliant on them, so as to prevent him from neglecting his cultivation. It was obvious that Senior Feng Qingyang had been paying attention to him since a long time ago. Furthermore, the importance he attached to him was unprecedented. At least, that was what Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor, told Duanling Tian. He was the closest subordinate to Feng Qingyang. Otherwise, Meng Luo would not have been so respectful to him. During the past 200 years, Duanling Tian had visited almost every corner of the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. He was familiar with every place. However, now that he had followed Elder Hua to meet Feng Qingyang, he felt that the journey that was supposed to be a short one seemed a little long. Moreover, he had mixed feelings about this. He was excited, filled with anticipation, and anxious. Most of all, he felt restrained. That's where Lord Heavenly Emperor lives, Hua Lao said to Duanling Tian as he looked at the floating island in front of them. The floating island was a forbidden area in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. Only a select few were allowed to enter. Since Duanling Tian was Feng Qingyang's future disciple, he had been here a few times in the past since he was acknowledged by Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor. The floating island was located in a secluded valley in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. The valley was like a paradise. It was filled with lush greenery, birds chirped, and flowers bloomed. Although Duanling Tian had been here before, he was in a completely different mood this time. In the past, he was in the mood to admire the scenery. However, now he was in no mood to admire the scenery. His attention was completely focused on the floating island in front of him. When he first came to this small floating island, he saw a spacious courtyard on top of it. There was a room behind the courtyard. It was just that even though he knew of the existence of this residence, he did not know that it was the residence of Feng Qingyang. Lord Heavenly Emperor, the young master has arrived. Elder Hua brought Duanling Tian up to the small floating island and landed in the courtyard. He bowed respectfully as he spoke to the room behind the courtyard. Duanling Tian took a deep breath as he stared at the courtyard in front of him. Whoosh! As soon as Elder Hua finished speaking, a deep yellow energy swept out from the room in front of him, bringing with it a majestic aura. Duanling Tian could tell it was the energy from the law of earth. In the next moment, Duanling Tian was shocked by what he saw. The khaki energy took form not far from him before it took the form of a human. Then, a silhouette appeared before it gradually became corporeal. A tall young man dressed in a green robe appeared before Duanling Tian's eyes. He had a handsome appearance with a hint of coldness in his expression. The young man's eyebrows were straight, and his eyes were extremely sharp as if they could see through everything. Now the young man was looking at Duanling Tian with a smile on his face. Many years ago, I saw you through the formation's mirror image. I haven't seen you since. Your appearance hasn't changed over the years, but your temperament has changed a lot. As soon as the young man spoke, Duanling Tian immediately confirmed his identity and hurriedly bowed to him. Duanling Tian greets Senior Feng Qingyang. You're still calling me senior? The young man raised his eyebrows with a mocking expression. Young master, you should call him master. At this moment, Hua Lao reminded him through voice transmission. Duanling Tian hurriedly corrected himself when he heard this. Duanling Tian greets master. Originally, he thought that he would have to go through a series of apprenticeship procedures before he could call Senior Feng Qingyang master. Now, it seemed that the other party did not care about formalities at all. The young man, Feng Qingyang, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, could not help but laugh when he heard Duanling Tian's words. We finally meet, master and disciple. Ever since I was trapped in the Azura Hell, I've lost contact with you. I've sent people to look for you, but you were no longer there. I think you must have ascended. I didn't expect you to become a celestial emperor in just a few hundred years. Feng Qingyang sighed emotionally when he reached the end of his sentence. At this moment, Hua Lao left, leaving only Duanling Tian and Feng Qingyang in the room. I had some fortuitous encounters. Duanling Tian smiled faintly. Then, he recalled something that caused a guilty expression to appear on his face. Master, I'd like to apologize for causing you to be trapped in the Azura Hell. You don't have to apologize. Feng Qingyang shook his head. Everything in the world is fated. You might think that you're the one who caused me to be trapped in the Azura Hell. However, if I wasn't trapped in the Azura Hell, I wouldn't be who I am today. Feng Qingyang had only managed to achieve what he had today because he was trapped in the Azura Hell. To a certain extent, it could be said that Duan Lingtian was the one who had helped him achieve his goals. For this reason he had always been concerned about Duan Lingtian. After leaving the Azura Hell, he had sent people to look for Duan Lingtian at the entrance of the Azura Hell. "Master, I heard that you've become a god?" Duan Lingtian asked curiously. "Yes." Feng Qingyang nodded. "I'm currently using the law of Earth's clone." No wonder. Realization dawned on Duan Lingtian when he recalled how his master had revealed himself earlier. As it turned out, this was the law of Earth's clone that the world-cleansing divine water had told him about. The world-cleansing divine water had told him that after one became a god, one would be able to form a law of Earth's clone after comprehending all the profundities of a law to the mastery stage. The law of Earth's clone could be detached from the main body and possess the strength of the law that the main body had mastered. As for the energy in the body, it was the divine energy. "I didn't expect you to be skilled in the law of Earth as well, master." Duan Lingtian sighed. Based on what he knew, his master, Feng Qingyang, had made a name for himself by comprehending the law of destruction. His strongest law was the law of destruction. His sword Dao was inclined toward the law of destruction. Feng Qingyang had comprehended the law of destruction through the sword Dao. Moreover, he had immersed himself in the sword Dao for many years. Therefore, his attainments in the law of destruction were unrivaled in the Devata realms. "I'm skilled in the law of destruction and the law of earth," Feng Qingyang said with a smile. Following that, Duan Lingtian and Feng Qingyang chatted for a while before Feng Qingyang asked about the incident in the past. "At that time, the person who wanted to kill me said it was because of you. He said it was the price I had to pay for passing on my legacy to you. That person was a half-step deity, and the profundities of law he comprehended were no weaker than mine back then. In addition, his divine artifact was stronger than mine, so I was no match for him. He said he came from the realm of gods, the divine offering land." "How did you offend such a person?" Feng Qingyang found it hard to believe. At that time, Duan Lingtian should still be in the mundane realm. How could someone from the mundane realm offend someone from the realm of gods? "Master, it's because of my wife Ker." Duan Lingtian did not hide the truth from Feng Qingyang. He told Feng Qingyang everything that had happened in the past. "The person who attacked you is just a servant of the Yun clan. I didn't expect that to be the reason." Realization dawned on Feng Qingyang when he heard Duan Lingtian's words. He looked at Duan Lingtian and said, "No wonder you've achieved so much in just a few hundred years. As it turns out, you're planning to save your wife when the spatial tunnel between the realms of gods and the Devata realms opens in a few hundred years." It was not difficult for Feng Qingyang to figure out that Duan Lingtian's achievements were largely due to the pressure from the Yun clan in the divine offering land. Before Duan Lingtian could reply, Feng Qingyang's eyes glinted as he changed the topic. "I've learned about the Saint Province realm. Come with me to the Luo River Heaven." He regretted asking this question. It was tantamount to reopening his disciple's scars. Chapter 34-34. It was not difficult for Feng Qingyang to empathize with Duan Lingtian's predicament. Back then, when he was being hunted down by the Shura clan's strongest expert, he had always wondered if Duan Lingtian would be in even more danger if he was hunted down by the people from the divine offering land even though he had not met Duan Lingtian before. For this reason, Duan Lingtian did not think Duan Lingtian was still alive. In fact, he thought Duan Lingtian was already dead. Previously, when he had just left the Azura Hell, he had casually sent someone to look for Duan Lingtian in the Saint Province realm because he was certain Duan Lingtian had met with mishap. He had only sent someone to look for Duan Lingtian because he wanted confirmation. Although the person did not manage to find Duan Lingtian, he did not find any news of Duan Lingtian's death when he went to the Saint Province realm to investigate. At that time, Duan Lingtian had harbored some fantasies. Naturally, it was only a fantasy. Duan Lingtian was certain Duan Lingtian was dead. After all, Duan Lingtian had offended people from the realms of gods while Duan Lingtian was only from a mundane realm. He had not even ascended to become a celestial. In the eyes of celestials from the Devata realms, Duan Lingtian was like an ant, let alone people from the realms of gods. Upon hearing about Duan Lingtian's past, Feng Qingyang was infuriated. He did not expect someone would be so ruthless. Luo River Heaven? Upon hearing Feng Qingyang's words, Duan Lingtian calmed down immediately. His attention was completely diverted. Although this was not the first time Duanling Tian had brought up the past, it was inevitable that his emotions would be affected. Humans were not plants, how could they be emotionless? Moreover, his beloved wife, Ke, was still trapped in the divine offering land. Yes. Feng Qingyang nodded. Although his expression was calm, Duanling Tian could see the cold gleam in Feng Qingyang's eyes as he looked at Feng Qingyang. The cold gleam in his eyes was as sharp as a sword. Master, I didn't handle the matter in the Saint Province realm properly. I didn't expect the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven would vent her anger on my hometown when she couldn't find me. Duanling Tian said apologetically. He had always felt guilty about what had happened in the Saint Province realm. After all, it had something to do with him. In order to save Muyi, he had destroyed the soul of Feng Jianshui, the daughter of the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven, Situ Zhuqing. I know what happened. I can't blame you. Feng Qingyang shook his head and said, if I were you, I would have done the same. Duanling, heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven's blood sect disciples' bodies. A hint of killing intent flashed across Feng Qingyang's eyes as he spoke. It was as though he was going to devour Feng Qingyang alive. Situ Zhuqing, the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven, wants to destroy a mundane realm for her own selfish desires. She treats the living beings in the mundane realms like ants that she can trample on. Feng Qingyang's voice was cold as he said, it's a pity she chose the wrong mundane realm this time. How can Situ Zhuqing touch Feng Qingyang's hometown as she pleases? Feng Qingyang and Duanling Tian left the solitary destructive heaven through the transporting formation in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. During this time, Feng Qingyang brought Duanling Tian to the transporting formation in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. The speed was so fast that Duanling Tian was stunned. So this is the speed of a godly being? Duanling Tian's heart skipped a beat when he arrived in the Luo River Heaven. Although he knew there was a huge difference between a godly being and a godly being, he finally realized how big the difference was after experiencing Feng Qingyang's speed. Moreover, his master was only a clone from the law of earth. The law of earth could be said to be the law of earth that was the slowest among all the laws in the world. However, Duanling Tian was certain his master was not a godly being. Even the fastest titled celestial emperors below the godly spirit realm would not be able to match his master's speed. The heavenly palace of the Luo River Heaven is in the Luo River sect. However, I've never been to the Luo River sect. Have you been here before? After arriving in the Luo River Heaven, Feng Qingyang did not bring Duanling Tian to the Luo River Heaven since he did not know the way. Indeed, Duanling Tian had been to the Luo River sect before. That was the first time he came to the Luo River Heaven to look for Muyi. He could still remember how excited he was at that time. After all, he had gained a close friend who had survived. However, Muyi's condition did not improve even after he had saved her. It was impossible for her to return to the Luo River Heaven. If it weren't for me, junior sister Muyi wouldn't have ended up like this. Duanling Tian could not help but sigh when he thought about Muyi. You don't have to blame yourself. Although you're the one who caused this, the most important thing is Yun Qingyan's choice. Not everyone is as ruthless as him. Feng Qingyang comforted Duanling Tian. He could empathize with his only disciple's feelings. Perhaps, it was because Duanling Tian and Feng Qingyang had been looking forward to meeting each other for a long time. Although they had just met, they got along very well with each other. It was as though they were master and disciple who had known each other for many years. The last time Duanling Tian met Muyi was outside the Luo River sect, so he knew the way to the Luo River sect. Under Duanling Tian's guidance, Feng Qingyang brought him to the entrance of the Luo River sect in just a blink of an eye. This time, Duanling Tian did not linger outside the Luo River sect. Feng Qingyang led him into the Luo River sect and shouted, Situ Zhuqing, get out here. Upon hearing Feng Qingyang's words, Duanling Tian was taken aback. He could not help but feel a sense of familiarity with Feng Qingyang's words. Duanling Tian's style was very similar to his. Duanling Tian thought since his master was the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven and Situ Zhuqing was the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven, Duanling Tian would first introduce himself before resorting to force. He did not expect Duanling Tian would ask Situ Zhuqing to get out of the Luo River sect as soon as he spoke. Feng Qingyang's words caused a commotion in the Luo River sect. What? Who's that? How dare he address our Lord Heavenly Emperor by her name? His voice is coming from above. Are the patrolling elders and disciples blind, or are they unable to see him? How dare he address our Lord Heavenly Emperor by her name and ask her to get out of the Luo River sect? I'm afraid he's not as simple as he seems. Many elders in the Luo River sect were infuriated by Feng Qingyang's words. However, most of them remained rational. They felt someone who dared to address their sect leader, the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven, by her name was not an ordinary person. Duan Lingtian either had a screw loose or possessed heaven-defying strength. Duan Lingtian would not be able to enter the Luo River sect at all. Although the high-ranking officials of the Luo River sect were wary of Duan Lingtian and Feng Qingyang, they braced themselves and flew into the air. More than a dozen high-ranking officials of the Luo River sect appeared before Duan Lingtian and Situ Zhuqing. Duan Lingtian and Feng Qingyang stood side by side as they looked at the high-ranking officials of the Luo River sect calmly. "Sir, why are you looking for our Lord Heavenly Emperor?" One of the titled celestial emperors from the Luo River sect asked worriedly as he looked at Duan Lingtian and Feng Qingyang. At this moment, an old man among the group of people from the Luo River sect widened his eyes in shock as he looked at Feng Qingyang. "Why, you're Feng Qingyang, the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River sect. You know me?" Feng Qingyang looked at the old man in surprise. After all, this was his first time in the Luo River sect in the Luo River Heaven. The other members of the Luo River sect were dumbfounded when they heard the old man's words. Based on his voice, it was obvious he was the one who had shouted at the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven earlier. Feng Qingyang, the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven, was looking for the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven? Moreover, it was obvious he did not come with good intentions. Needless to say, they felt their scalps tingling. Even though they were all heavenly emperors, there were differences in strength. Before Feng Qingyang was trapped in the Azura Hell, he was already stronger than the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven. Now that Feng Qingyang's strength had improved, it was obvious the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven was no match for him. "Lord Heavenly Emperor." The old man who recognized Feng Qingyang bowed respectfully and said, "My friend is a titled celestial emperor from the heavenly palace of the Shenyuan Heaven. I was fortunate enough to meet you when I visited my friend in the heavenly palace of the Shenyuan Heaven." "I see." Realization dawned on Feng Qingyang. Indeed, he had visited the heavenly palace of the Shenyuan Heaven in the past because he was friends with Gongsun Shenyuan, the heavenly emperor of the Shenyuan Heaven. However, ever since he left the Azura Hell, he had never visited the heavenly palace of the Shenyuan Heaven again. However, that did not mean the Heavenly Emperor of the Shenyuan Heaven would not come to the Heavenly Palace of the Solitary Destructive Heaven to look for Feng Qingyang. After all, the Heavenly Emperor of the Shenyuan Heaven always came to look for Feng Qingyang. Now that Feng Qingyang had returned, it was his turn to visit the Heavenly Emperor of the Shenyuan Heaven. Naturally, the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven wanted to see how Feng Qingyang was doing. He wanted to see how Feng Qingyang was doing. Even so, the Heavenly Emperor of 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 Thane the Past. Although Feng Qingyang was skilled in the law of earth, he could only fight to a draw with the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven by using the law of destruction. At that time, Feng Qingyang defeated the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven with just one of his clones. The Heavenly Emperor of the Shenyuan Heaven? Duan Lingtian's eyes widened slightly when he heard the old man's words. If he was not mistaken, Hualao had told him that the Heavenly Emperor of the Shenyuan Heaven, Gongsun Shenyuan, was from the Yanhuang planet in the Yanhuang realm in his past life. Gongsun Shenyuan was born in the Jade Emperor Heaven. His strength had skyrocketed and he had defeated a Heavenly Emperor to replace the Heavenly Emperor of the Shenyuan Heaven. Chapter 34-35. Your Majesty, why are you looking for our Heavenly Emperor? The old man who recognized Feng Qingyang asked respectfully. The Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven was not a match for the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven. Based on the Heavenly Emperor's tone, it was clear the old man did not come with good intentions. If the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven had offended the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven, he would have to leave the sect as soon as possible to avoid being implicated. I'll settle the score with her, Feng Qingyang said indifferently. Although Feng Qingyang's divine consciousness could cover the entire Luo River sect and the Heavenly Emperor Palace in the Luo River Heaven, he did not know Situ Zhuqing, the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven. He could only detect how many 10 Directions Celestial Emperors there were in the Luo River sect. Although there were not many 10 Directions Celestial Emperors in the Luo River sect, there were still quite a number of them. Apart from those who did not come out, more than half of the people here were 10 Directions Celestial Emperors. For this reason, he was not certain who the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven was. The old man's eyes widened. It seemed like he had guessed correctly. She'll die today. When the others looked at Feng Qingyang anxiously, their expressions changed drastically when they heard Feng Qingyang's words. After all, Feng Qingyang had killed a heavenly emperor because of Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor. Was he here to kill the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven? Your Majesty. At this moment, an old woman among the group of people looked at Feng Qingyang with a bitter expression on her face. Did our heavenly emperor do something to infuriate you more than 200 years ago? As soon as the old woman spoke, the gazes of the other dozen or so people immediately fell on her. Their eyes were filled with doubt and shock. Did their heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven offend Feng Qingyang? Moreover, the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven wanted to kill her because of Feng Qingyang? Was she crazy? It seems like you know. Feng Qingyang looked deeply at the old woman and said with a meaningful tone, Lord Heavenly Emperor, I don't know. The old woman smiled bitterly and said, However, I know that the heavenly emperor of our Luo River Heaven left with the saintess more than 200 years ago. Until now they still haven't returned. Moreover, before we went out, we didn't tell them what we were going to do. In the past, although the Lord Heavenly Emperor has left the Luo River Heaven, the longest time he left was not more than 30 years. This time it's too abnormal. The old woman said. He left 200 years ago? Feng Qingyang narrowed his eyes when he heard the old woman's words. A mocking smile appeared on his face as he thought to himself, she's really smart to have left so early. However, does she think that I can't do anything to her after she leaves the heavenly palace of the Luo River Heaven? When Duan Lingtian heard the old woman's words, he was shocked. The Luo River Heavenly Emperor had fled the Luo River Heavenly Emperor 200 years ago? After all, Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor, had appeared in the Saint Province realm 200 years ago. In other words, after the Luo River Heavenly Emperor learned that she had offended Feng Qingyang by sending people to the Saint Province realm to kill countless living beings, she had fled the Luo River Heaven. Heavens! My master is so terrifying. That's the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven. She's the heavenly emperor of a Devata realm. How could she flee the moment she learned she had offended my master? She's a heavenly emperor. How could she be so shameless? Duan Lingtian was truly shocked. Although he knew his master, Feng Qingyang, had attained godhood, according to his master, not many people knew that he had truly attained godhood, even though there were rumors in the outside world that he was suspected to have attained godhood. However, when he thought about how the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven was no match for his master in the Azura Hell, he felt relieved. At the same time, Duan Lingtian discovered a middle-aged man among the dozen or so people from the Luo River sect was staring at him intently. He knew the middle-aged man must have recognized him. What's wrong? Did you help the saint girl of the Luo River sect look for me? Back then, when he came to the Luo River sect to meet Mui, he had shown his face at the entrance of the Luo River sect. Presumably, the disciples of the Luo River sect who had seen him could draw a portrait of him for the Luo River sect to find him. As soon as Duan Lingtian finished speaking, the people from the Luo River sect began to study Duan Lingtian. Since they were so focused on Feng Qingyang earlier, they had completely forgotten about Duan Lingtian. Why are Duan Lingtian? The one who kidnapped the saintess's disciple, Mui? An old man asked in surprise. At the same time, his heart was filled with shock. He would never have thought that the person the holy maiden of the Luo River sect would ask them to look for was someone close to Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang of the solitary destructive heaven. Moreover, looking at the two of them standing side by side, it was obvious that they were not master and servant. It seems that you do know me. Duan Lingtian said indifferently, however, I didn't kidnap Mui, the disciple of the Luo River sect's saint lady. I only rescued her. Your Luo River sect's saintess allowed her twin sister, Feng Jianshui, to possess my junior sister, Mui. When I discovered this, I forcefully took her away and destroyed Feng Jianshui's soul that was occupying her body. That's why the saint girl of your Luo River sect and the heavenly emperor of your Luo River Heaven hated me to the core. That's why they sent people to kill all the living beings in the Devata realms. Duan Lingtian said. Twin sister? Upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words, apart from a few people who knew about this, the rest of the people were shocked. They did not know the saint girl of the Luo River sect had a twin sister. Naturally, the Saint Girl's twin sister was the biological daughter of the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven. Unfortunately, the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven didn't know the mundane realm she was going to kill was the hometown of my master, Feng Qingyang. At that time, Meng Luo, the Heavenly Savage Celestial Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven, stepped in and stopped the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven from sending people to the mundane realm. Yes, that happened to be more than 200 years ago. Duanling Tian had a furious expression on his face when he spoke. Although Senior Meng Luo has made a move, most of the living beings in my and my master's hometown have been slaughtered. We were too late. A dignified heavenly emperor of a Devata realm slaughtered the people of a Devata realm for his own selfish desires. Such a person deserves to die. Duan Lingtian's voice became colder and colder, giving people the feeling that they had fallen into an ice cellar. The titled celestial emperors from the Luo River sect were stunned when they heard Duan Lingtian's words. They did not expect their heavenly emperor of the Luo River sect to offend Feng Qingyang, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, because of Duan Lingtian. What was even more unexpected was that this Duan Lingtian was actually heavenly emperor Feng Qingyang's disciple. They were afraid that the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven would kill them in a fit of anger. Their expressions changed drastically when they saw the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. Lord Celestial Emperor. At this moment the old man who recognized Feng Qingyang said respectfully, I didn't know about that matter and it has nothing to do with me. In order to show my sincerity, I'll bring my disciples and leave the Luo River sect today. Please don't vent your anger on me, Lord Celestial Emperor. Upon hearing the old man's words, the remaining titled celestial emperors chimed in one after another. All of them broke out in cold sweat, afraid that Feng Qingyang would seek revenge on them in a fit of anger. After all, the culprit had already escaped. No one could be sure that Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang would not target them. Master. At this moment, Duan Lingtian looked at Feng Qingyang and said through voice transmission, Why don't we use me as bait to lure the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven out? I killed her daughter so she must hate me to the core. If she knows where I am, she'll definitely come looking for me. There's no need for that. Feng Qingyang rejected Duan Lingtian's suggestion. She won't fall for it so easily. Perhaps, some of the people in front of us have already sent messages to others regarding the fact that you are my disciple. Perhaps, it won't take long for the Heavenly Emperor of the Luo River Heaven to find out about it. For this reason, there's an 80 to 90% chance it'll be useless. Moreover, although there are 81 Devata realms, there's only so much space in the 81 Devata realms. Is she going to hide forever? I'm not interested in looking for her. Let's wait for her to show up. If she dares to show up, she'll definitely die. Feng Qingyang's tone was extremely calm. It was as though killing a heavenly emperor was no different from killing a chicken. Upon hearing Feng Qingyang's words, Duan Lingtian could hear the arrogance and contempt in his master's voice. He nodded and said, Master is right. Since she has escaped, there's no need for us to go through so much trouble to look for her. She's not worth our effort. Let's wait for her to show up. Speaking of which, I'd rather kill her with my own hands. A hint of killing intent flashed in Duan Lingtian's eyes. Situ Zhu Qin, the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven, had destroyed his hometown, slaughtered the descendants of his old friends, and was suspected to have killed Xuanai's family. There's no rush to kill the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven. However, we still have to go to the heavenly palace of the floating heaven. Feng Qingyang's eyes flashed as he said, Hualao has told me about your encounter there. Although Yang Yunxiao, the heavenly emperor of the floating heaven, is an old friend of mine, I'll have to ask him for an explanation for shielding his disciple. Duan Lingtian had thought Feng Qingyang was just going to argue with him. However, when Feng Qingyang saw Yang Yunxiao, the heavenly emperor of the floating heaven, before Yang Yunxiao could say anything, Feng Qingyang immediately made his move. His terrifying energy caused the space around him to tremble and tear apart. In the next moment, a huge sword appeared. It seemed to be looking down on the world as it pressed down on Yang Yunxiao. Duan Lingtian was dumbfounded. How could this be considered an explanation? End of this chapter. Chapter 34-36. Bang. Even though Yang Yunxiao had reacted hastily, he was still unable to block Feng Qingyang's attack. Feng Qingyang's attack, which contained the law of earth, instantly injured Yang Yunxiao and sent him flying. Pfft. Yang Yunxiao opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His rosy cheeks were drained of all color in just a blink of an eye. Heavenly Emperor Yang Yunxiao, it seems like you haven't improved even after so many years. Feng Qingyang narrowed his eyes at Yang Yunxiao and said with a faint smile on his face. Based on his tone, he did not seem like the person who had just injured Yang Yunxiao. Initially, a hint of anger could be seen on Yang Yunxiao's face. However, in just a blink of an eye, a hint of horror appeared on his face. Feng, Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang, why have you really become a god? In the past, rumors had only spread that Feng Qingyang had become a god, but no one had given him an answer. However, he was completely powerless when faced with Feng Qingyang's attack that contained the law of earth. Moreover, he could sense a terrifying energy that completely suppressed the celestial origin energy in his body. It was obvious the energy belonged to the divine energy that was above the celestial origin energy. After a 10-direction celestial emperor ascended to godhood, his celestial origin energy would transform into a higher level of power. It was the power of a god. Yes. Feng Qingyang nodded. Yang Yunxiao smiled bitterly. He was not angry at Feng Qingyang for injuring him. After all, he knew it would not be difficult for Feng Qingyang to kill him with his current strength. In the past, you were only evenly matched with me when you relied on the law of destruction. Now that you've become a god, you can easily defeat me even if you use the law of earth. There's a huge difference between becoming a god and not becoming a god. Yang Yunxiao sighed. At this moment, Yang Yunxiao did not even have the courage to show his anger in front of Feng Qingyang. Although he was a heavenly emperor of a Devata realm, his life was in Feng Qingyang's hands after all. At this moment, Duan Lingtian, who was standing next to Feng Qingyang, finally regained his senses. His master was too valiant, right? When he arrived in front of Yang Yunxiao, he did not even bother to greet him before injuring him. Even after being severely injured, Yang Yunxiao did not dare to get angry. Instead, he maintained a smile on his face. From this, one could see how powerful his master was in Yang Yunxiao's eyes. When Duan Lingtian thought about how the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven had abandoned his master and fled the Luo River Heaven, he felt relieved. If I become a god, I'll be as powerful as Yang Yunxiao as well. At this moment, Duan Lingtian was eager to become a god. Moreover, even if I've just become a god 1,000 years later, I'm afraid I won't be able to rescue Ku, or even if I go to the divine offering land in the realms of gods. Unless I become a god earlier and improve my strength, my chances of rescuing Ku are slim. When Duan Lingtian thought of this, his mood became inexplicably heavy. Heavenly Emperor Yang Yunxiao, you should know I'm not here to catch up with you. Feng Qingyang glanced at Yang Yunxiao indifferently and said, don't you think you owe me an explanation for what happened to my disciple? In fact, when Feng Qingyang arrived and saw Duan Lingtian standing next to Feng Qingyang, Yang Yunxiao had already guessed Feng Qingyang's purpose for coming. However, he did not expect Feng Qingyang would attack him without any hesitation. At this moment, Yang Yunxiao could sense Feng Qingyang's intention to protect his disciple. At the same time, he was glad he had allowed his second disciple, the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor, to leave the heavenly palace of the floating heaven. Otherwise, he would have no choice but to hand Kong Fen over to Yang Yunxiao. What's the matter? Yang Yunxiao asked. Although Yang Yunxiao knew Feng Qingyang's purpose for coming here, he was not foolish enough to admit that he had not made the right decision. Therefore, he decided to feign ignorance. It's only been 200 years. How can you be so forgetful, Heavenly Emperor Yang Yunxiao? Feng Qingyang sneered as he looked at Yang Yunxiao. Yang Yunxiao fell silent for a moment before he feigned surprise and said, Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang, are you referring to the incident where my second disciple, the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor, tried to kill junior nephew Duan more than 200 years ago? Before Feng Qingyang could reply, Yang Yunxiao continued to say, that incident was caused by my second disciple's son. I also killed him in front of junior nephew Duan. As for my second disciple, he was only an accomplice. He was tricked by his son. For this reason, I only punished him slightly. Slightly? At this moment, Duan Lingtian finally regained his senses. Upon hearing Yang Yunxiao's words, he could not help but sneer. Heavenly Emperor Yang Yunxiao, you only made the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor face the wall for a few hundred years. Is this considered a slight punishment? Do you think I'm a fool, or do you think my master is a fool? The sneer on Duan Lingtian's face deepened. Martial nephew Duan. When Yang Yunxiao heard Duan Lingtian's words, an apologetic expression appeared on his face. Back then you didn't say anything when I punished Kong Fen. I thought you approved of my punishment. But I didn't expect that you were dissatisfied. You should have told me earlier. If you had told me back then that you wanted him dead, I would have definitely executed him. Yang Yunxiao said decisively. What's the point of speaking in hindsight? Duan Lingtian sneered. What? Martial nephew Duan, you don't believe me? Yang Yunxiao shook his head. I'll call my second disciple Kong Fen over. If martial nephew Duan wants him dead, I'll kill him myself. Martial nephew Duan, if you want to kill him personally, I will also capture him so that you can kill him easily. As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Yunxiao began to transmit the message. A confused expression appeared on Feng Qingyang's face when Duan Lingtian scoffed. If I'm not mistaken, your second disciple, the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor, is no longer in the heavenly palace of the floating heaven, right? Heavenly Emperor Yang Yunxiao, you're really something else. Even the heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven, Situ Zhuqin, had fled the Luo River Heaven in fear of his master, Feng Qingyang. How could an ordinary titled celestial emperor dare to stay in the floating heaven palace of the floating heaven? Duan Lingtian and Hua Lao had personally witnessed Yang Yunxiao's determination to protect Kong Fen, the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor. Therefore, based on Yang Yunxiao's pretense, how could he not guess that Kong Fen had left the heavenly palace of the floating heaven? A hint of panic flashed in the depths of Yang Yunxiao's eyes when he heard Duan Lingtian's words. Then he forced a smile and said, Martial nephew Duan, how can you think of me in such a way? At this moment, Feng Qingyang looked at Yang Yunxiao coldly and said, Yang Yunxiao, I'll be waiting for you and your second disciple in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. I'll give you a month. If you don't see him in a month, you can either wait for me to kill you or flee with your people. As soon as Feng Qingyang finished speaking, Yang Yunxiao's expression changed drastically. Without any hesitation, he left the heavenly palace of the floating heaven with Duan Lingtian in tow. Yang Yunxiao was the only one left standing on the spot. Various expressions could be seen on his face as he muttered to himself, I didn't expect Feng Qingyang to have attained godhood. I didn't expect him to value his disciple so much. It seems like Kong Fen won't be able to escape this time. Fortunately, I didn't have the time to inform him that Feng Qingyang wants to kill him. Otherwise he would have gone into hiding. At that time, even I might not be able to find him. Duan Lingtian was still thinking about how difficult it would be to find Kong Fen after Kong Fen escaped. He did not expect his master, Feng Qingyang, would not hesitate to threaten Yang Yunxiao. Based on Feng Qingyang's words, it was clear he wanted Yang Yunxiao to personally send Kong Fen to the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. Otherwise his master, Feng Qingyang, would kill Kong Fen in a month's time. Naturally, Yang Yunxiao had another option. He could flee with his people and live in seclusion. At the same time, he would have to give up his position as the heavenly emperor of the floating heaven and his foundation in the floating heaven. Master, will he flee with his people and live in seclusion? Duan Lingtian asked. In Duan Lingtian's opinion, since Yang Yunxiao was willing to offend him for the sake of his disciple, it was not impossible for Yang Yunxiao to flee with his people and live in seclusion for the sake of his disciple. Impossible. Feng Qingyang shook his head. Although I don't have much interaction with Yang Yunxiao, based on my past interactions with him, he cares more about his current position than his disciple. He won't give up his position as the heavenly emperor of the floating heaven so easily. Feng Qingyang said. Let's return to the solitary destructive heaven and wait for him. Feng Qingyang brought Duan Lingtian with him as they left the floating heaven and returned to the solitary destructive heaven. Upon hearing Feng Qingyang's words, a hint of anticipation could be seen in Duan Lingtian's eyes. If his master was not mistaken, he was looking forward to seeing Yang Yunxiao bring his disciple to the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. After Duan Lingtian and Feng Qingyang left the floating heaven and returned to the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven, Duan Lingtian finally received a message from Kong Fen. In the heavenly palace of the floating heaven, Yang Yunxiao finally sent a message to Kong Fen, the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor who was no longer in the heavenly palace of the floating heaven. Kong Fen, I just returned from the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. Feng Qingyang, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, thanked me for killing your son. You can return now. Even though Kong Fen was his disciple, Yang Yunxiao didn't dare to tell him the truth because he knew this was the only way to trick Kong Fen back. After leaving the heavenly palace of the floating heaven, Kong Fen would occasionally wander around the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven to see if he could find Duan Lingtian. However, even after 200 years had passed, he still did not find Duan Lingtian. Although Duan Lingtian had been visiting the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven for the past 100 years, he rarely visited the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. Currently he spent most of his time in the floating heaven. Can we go back now? Kong Fen's eyes lit up when he received the message from his master, the Heavenly Emperor of the Floating Heaven. Chapter 34-37. Since Yang Yunxiao, the Heavenly Emperor of the Floating Heaven, had insisted on protecting him, he did not doubt Yang Yunxiao's words at all. He completely trusted Yang Yunxiao. For this reason, he immediately returned to the Heavenly Palace of the Floating Heaven. Since he was in the Floating Heaven, it was impossible for him to join a Heaven-grade force since all the high-ranking officials in the Heaven-grade forces knew he was the second true disciple of the Heavenly Emperor of the Floating Heaven. Although he would have a good cultivation environment if he joined a Heaven-grade force, it would not be difficult for Feng Qingyang, the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven, to find him. For this reason he could not join a Heaven-grade force. Moreover, he could not return to the Heavenly Palace of the Floating Heaven. For this reason he could only cultivate in an ordinary environment. He was used to staying in the Heavenly Palace of the Floating Heaven. Since his master had said he could return to the Heavenly Palace of the Floating Heaven, and Feng Qingyang, the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven, did not make a move on him, he was eager to return to the Heavenly Palace of the Floating Heaven. Then he returned to the Heavenly Palace of the Floating Heaven. "Master, I'm sorry for making you worry," Kongfen said guiltily after he returned to Yang Yunxiao. Yang Yunxiao looked at Kongfen and said with a sigh, "Kongfen, you shouldn't have allowed your son to fool around. Otherwise he wouldn't have become a burden to you." Kongfen was taken aback by Yang Yunxiao's words. What was going on? Why was his master saying something completely different from what he had told him in the transmission earlier? "Master." At this moment the almighty Wind Celestial Emperor Kongfen had a bad premonition. Without waiting for Yang Yunxiao's reply, his figure flashed as a gust of wind blew past him and pushed him away. However, as soon as he moved, he felt a powerful force that seemed to come from all directions and bound him. "Master." Kongfen looked at Yang Yunxiao with a hint of resentment in his eyes. What? If Kongfen still did not know that his master, the Heavenly Emperor of the Floating Heaven, had tricked him, he would have lived his life in vain. "Kongfen, there's nothing master can do." Yang Yunxiao sighed. Feng Qingyang, the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven, is too domineering. Today he brought the Duanling Tian to the Heavenly Palace of the Floating Heaven and severely injured me. When he discovered you weren't in the Heavenly Palace of the Floating Heaven, he ordered me to bring you back to the Heavenly Palace of the Solitary Destructive Heaven, or leave the Heavenly Palace of the Floating Heaven. He's already a deity. He can kill me with just a wave of his hand. So that's why don't blame him. If you want to blame someone, blame that son of yours. Fen's Kongs. Did Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang really become a god? Tian was Not's was Heavenly Palace of the Heavenly Palace Heavenly Ascending Heavens? Heavenly Heaven of the Heaven of the Heaven, of the Heavenly Heavens, of the Heaven of the Heaven, Heaven of the Heaven of the Heaven of the Heaven of the Heaven. However, he did not expect Duanling Tian to be so arrogant. After all, Feng Qingyang was acquainted with his master. However, he did not expect Feng Qingyang would fall out with his master and threaten him for the sake of his true disciple. "Master, does Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang not care about our past relationship at all?" Kongfen was still filled with resentment. He knew he would not be able to escape from the Heavenly Emperor of the Floating Heaven now that he had fallen into his master's hands. However, he still wanted a chance at survival. "Past relationship?" Yang Yunxiao shook his head and said, "We're just acquaintances. What past relationship is there? Originally, I thought that no matter what, he would not fall out with me on account of the fact that we are only acquaintances. Unfortunately, I overestimated myself and underestimated his determination. It's obvious he really cares about his true disciple, Duanling Tian. Otherwise he wouldn't have gone to such lengths." Yang Yunxiao said. At this moment Kongfen was filled with despair. After returning to the Heavenly Palace of the Solitary Destructive Heaven with his master, Feng Qingyang, Duanling Tian did not return to his residence. Instead he followed Feng Qingyang and listened to his master's teachings. "Since you have the Sovereign Heart Sword, it won't be difficult for you to comprehend the law of destruction. However, the law of space you're skilled in is one of the four supreme laws. It's not inferior to the law of destruction." At this moment Feng Qingyang looked at Duanling Tian and said loudly, "For this reason I suggest you don't give up on comprehending the law of space unless you've reached a bottleneck in your comprehension of the law of space. It won't be too late for you to comprehend the law of destruction when you have the time to comprehend other laws." "Yes, master." Duanling Tian nodded. He knew Feng Qingyang was doing this for his own good. He knew he should not bite off more than he could chew. "Apart from that, I'll do my best to help you once the spatial passageway between the realms of gods and the Devata realms is opened," Feng Qingyang said. Upon hearing Feng Qingyang's words, Duan Lingtian's heart warmed. Thank you, master. Currently his master, Feng Qingyang, was aware of his wife's identity in the Divine Offering Land and Yun Qingyan's identity as the young master of the Yun clan. Both of them were extraordinary in the Divine Offering Land. Even so, Duan Lingtian still wanted to help him. Duan Lingtian was touched. Although I don't suggest you comprehend the law of destruction, it's not impossible for you to comprehend the sword Dao without the law of destruction. Take my sword Dao for example. Although my sword Dao is the strongest when I rely on the law of destruction, it's still lethal even after I've fused it with the law of earth. Feng Qingyang continued to say, of course, it's not as good as fusing the law of destruction. However, I dare say that in all the Devata realms, those who have comprehended the law of space as well as I do are at least 30% weaker than me in terms of offensive power. And all of this is because of my sword Dao. For the next period of time, you will follow me to comprehend my sword Dao. I will slowly impart it to you. As for how much you can comprehend, it will depend on your ability. If you can comprehend all of them, you can use the same law of space with my sword Dao, and its power will increase by at least 30%. When Feng Qingyang reached the end of his sentence, a hint of confidence could be heard in his voice. Upon hearing Feng Qingyang's words, Duan Lingtian could not help but gasp in shock. 30% amplification? At this moment, Duan Lingtian was no longer a newbie who had just ascended to a Devata realm. In fact, he was now a celestial emperor. After reaching this stage, he had a better understanding of a person's strength. A person's strength mainly depended on the comprehension of the law of space. Even if one had some special techniques to amplify one's strength, it would be considered good if one's strength could be amplified by 10%. However, now that his master, Feng Qingyang, had told him that his sword Dao would be able to amplify his sword Dao. Mastering his sword Dao would increase the strength of those who had comprehended the same profundities by 30%. Even if he subtracted the 10%, he would still have 20%. For two people of the same strength, even if they were evenly matched before the increase in strength, the person with the increase in strength after the increase in strength would be able to easily crush his opponent. Thank you, master. Duan Lingtian hastily expressed his gratitude. At the same time, he saw hope in increasing his strength. Currently, what he wanted the most was to improve his strength as soon as possible. In the past, he had used the Supreme Powerhouse Divinity to comprehend the law of space to improve his strength. And now, he had another way to increase his strength. You may return for now. Rest for a few days. When the time comes, I'll send you a message. I'll teach you the sword Dao, Feng Qingyang said. Yes, master. Duan Lingtian nodded and left. At the same time, he asked the world-cleansing divine water in his little world about the sword Dao that Feng Qingyang had mentioned. After listening to Duan Lingtian's explanation, the world-cleansing divine water fell silent for a moment before it said, if what he said is true, then he's really a peerless genius. Even in the realms of gods, it's rare to find someone capable of such a feat. In fact, in the realms of gods, people with such talent are generally acknowledged as the seeds of the supreme powerhouses. Duan Lingtian's eyes widened in shock when he heard the world-cleansing divine water's words. Isn't it said that there are only two ways to become a supreme powerhouse? One is to comprehend one of the four supreme laws and fuse all the profundities together. The other is to possess one of the five divine elements and transform it into its final form. Indeed, one can become a supreme powerhouse through these two methods. The world-cleansing divine water continued to say, apart from these two, there's another way. It's the way I mentioned earlier, to comprehend one's own Dao. Although it's illusory to comprehend one's own Dao, it's not entirely without reason. You should know that apart from the laws of the five elements, the laws of wind, the laws of lightning, the laws of ice, and the four supreme laws, there are also the laws of destruction, the laws of light, and the laws of darkness, right? The world-cleansing divine water asked. Yes. Duan Lingtian replied. Naturally, he knew about these laws. In this world, those who have comprehended their own Dao to become a supreme powerhouse have either comprehended the law of destruction, the law of light, or the law of darkness. This is the third way to become a supreme powerhouse. For this reason, I said your master, Feng Qingyang, has the potential to become a supreme powerhouse. As for whether he'll be able to become a supreme powerhouse in the future, it'll depend on his own fortune. The world-cleansing divine water said, the fact that he's willing to pass on his sword Dao to you shows how important you are to him. However, it's extremely difficult for others to fully grasp the sword Dao that they've comprehended on their own. It's already amazing that you're able to comprehend 2/3 of the sword Dao. Moreover, if you're talented, you'll have a chance to comprehend your own sword Dao. End of chapter. Chapter 34-38. The world-cleansing divine water's words seemed to have opened the door to a whole new world for Duan Lingtian. However, what shocked Duan Lingtian the most was his master, Feng Qingyang, had the potential to become a supreme powerhouse even though he did not possess the 5 divine elements and did not even specialize in the 4 supreme laws. This was because he had comprehended his own Tao. To be more precise, he had comprehended his own sword Tao, and he had the potential to become a supreme powerhouse. In fact, even if those who have comprehended the 5 divine elements don't possess the 5 divine elements, they'll still have a chance to become a supreme powerhouse if they can comprehend their own Tao. It's not like there haven't been such supreme powerhouses in this world, it's just that there are very few of them. Those who became ultimate powerhouses with their own Tao are all supremely talented existences. After all, they could be said to be ultimate powerhouses who completely relied on themselves. Regardless of whether one became an omnipotent through the use of the 5 divine elements or the advantage of the 4 supreme laws, they all borrowed the power of the 5 divine elements and the supreme laws to a certain extent. Only by comprehending one's own Tao and using one's own Tao to become an omnipotent being can one truly become an omnipotent being with one's own efforts. A hint of respect could be heard in the world-cleansing divine water's voice as it spoke. For your master to be able to comprehend his own sword Tao to such an extent, he's definitely a peerless genius even in the realms of gods. Based on the world-cleansing divine water's words, it did not hold back on its praise for Feng Qingyang. Duan Lingtian was truly shocked. In the past, when he was still in the mundane realm, he had relied on the legacy of the sovereign heart sword that his master, Feng Qingyang, had left behind for him to possess extraordinary battle prowess. At that time he knew Feng Qingyang was not a simple person. In the Saint Province realm, Feng Qingyang was a legend. However, he did not expect his master, Feng Qingyang, would still be as monstrous as before even after ascending to the Devata realm. Moreover, he had even comprehended his own sword Tao. If someone who had the same cultivation as him and comprehended the same profundities of the laws as him fought him, he would definitely lose. Even in the realms of gods, it was rare for someone to achieve such a feat. The sword immortals of the solitary destructive heaven recognized him as the invincible sword immortal. He truly lived up to his name. A Tao that belongs to me. After listening to the world-cleansing divine water's words, Duan Lingtian did not come back to his senses for a long time. He was still immersed in the world of the so-called Tao. It turned out that in this world, there was such a mysterious method that was beyond the laws of nature. After Duan Lingtian returned, he originally thought that he would have to wait a few days before his master, Feng Qingyang, would send him a message, and Feng Qingyang also said the same. However, before the second day had even arrived, his master had already sent him a voice transmission asking him to go over. At first he was a little confused, but later on he realized why his master had asked him to come. The heavenly emperor of the floating heaven, Yang Yunxiao, had arrived. Yang Yunxiao didn't come alone. There was another person by his side. To be more precise, this person was imprisoned by Yang Yunxiao. Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang, I'm glad I didn't disappoint you. Yang Yunxiao said to Feng Qingyang. A hint of helplessness could be seen in his eyes. Once upon a time, his strength was on par with Feng Qingyang. If it was Feng Qingyang at that time, he could have saved his second disciple, Kong Fen, with just a word. There was no need for him to personally deliver Kong Fen to Yang Yunxiao. However, the current Feng Qingyang was already a godly being. With his strength, it would be easy for him to kill Yang Yunxiao. For this reason, in the face of Feng Qingyang's threat, Yang Yunxiao obediently brought Kong Fen over. Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor. Duan Lingtian stood next to Feng Qingyang as he looked at Kong Fen, the Almighty Wind Celestial Emperor, who was standing next to Yang Yunxiao. His expression was calm as though he was looking at a stranger. This was because Duan Lingtian knew Kong Fen was already a dead man. Is it him? Feng Qingyang asked as he looked at Duan Lingtian. That's right. Duan Lingtian nodded. You can do it yourself. Feng Qingyang said. Yes, master. Duan Lingtian nodded. At the same time he stepped forward and looked at Yang Yunxiao. Heavenly Emperor Yang Yunxiao, I'll have to trouble you to restrain him so that I can kill him. If you don't restrain him properly and he injures me, I'm afraid my master won't agree to it. A bright smile appeared on Duan Lingtian's face when he finished speaking. When Yang Yunxiao heard Duan Lingtian's words, he nodded obediently and forced a smile on his face. Don't worry, junior nephew Duan. As long as I'm here, he won't be able to touch a single hair on your head. Even though Yang Yunxiao was extremely displeased, he could only swallow his displeasure and fear of Feng Qingyang. He did not dare to show it in the slightest. Duan Lingtian. At this moment, Kong Fin, the almighty Wind Celestial Emperor who was restrained by Yang Yunxiao, regained his composure. His eyes shone brightly as he looked at Duan Lingtian. As long as you don't kill me, I, Kong Fin, am willing to be your slave for life. The great almighty Wind Celestial Emperor wants to be Duan Lingtian's slave? Duan Lingtian only smiled faintly in the face of Kong Fin's final struggle. Then his eyes turned cold. He did not give Kong Fin a chance to retaliate and directly killed Kong Fin. With Yang Yunxiao, the heavenly emperor of the floating heaven, Kong Fin did not even have the chance to resist before he was killed by Duan Lingtian. After Kong Fin's death, Yang Yunxiao looked at Feng Qingyang and asked, "Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang, are you satisfied with this?" "Yes." Feng Qingyang nodded indifferently. Yang Yunxiao did not intend to stay any longer. He bade farewell to Feng Qingyang and left. At this moment, Duan Lingtian finally realized the importance of strength. Yang Yunxiao was the heavenly emperor of the floating heaven after all. Nobody in the floating heaven dared to defy him. However, in front of his master Feng Qingyang he was as docile as a cat. Moreover, he even personally delivered his true disciple to Feng Qingyang for him to kill. If Yang Yunxiao was stronger than Feng Qingyang, he would not have been able to kill Kong Fin. Duan Lingtian returned to his residence and slept for a few days. With the supreme powerhouse divinity, he was able to further comprehend the law of space. A few days later, Feng Qingyang sent him a message that woke him up. Feng Qingyang wanted him to cultivate with him. After arriving at Feng Qingyang's residence, Duan Lingtian was brought to a desolate canyon in a remote area of the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. He had passed by this place before, but he did not linger here. After all, the canyon was too desolate. There was not even a single living being in it. This was simply a place where birds didn't want to shit. However, when he arrived at the entrance of the canyon with Feng Qingyang raised his hand, and a powerful energy surged out of his body. Soon after, a wave of energy surged in the air above the canyon. In the next moment, Duan Lingtian felt goosebumps all over his body. A terrifying aura surged out of the canyon and shrouded him. He felt as though he was in an abyss of fire. "Let's go in and have a look." As soon as Duan Lingtian entered the canyon with Feng Qingyang, he saw a scene that he would never forget for the rest of his life. There were sword marks on the walls of the canyon. Some were deep, some were shallow, some were parallel, some were crisscrossed, and some were curved. Each of the sword marks emitted a terrifying aura. "This canyon is where I practice my sword skills. If you want to learn my sword skills, you can stay here for a while to see if you can comprehend anything." Feng Qingyang said to Duan Lingtian, "Apart from me, you're the first one to enter this place. Normally, this place is enveloped by a formation. Only I know how to open the formation. If I forcibly break the formation, I will destroy everything in this canyon." "If you break it, you'll be destroyed," Feng Qingyang said. Upon hearing Feng Qingyang's words, it was not difficult for Duan Lingtian to realize the importance of this place. Otherwise, his master, Feng Qingyang, would not have set up a formation here. Based on Feng Qingyang's words, it was not difficult for Duan Lingtian to figure out that the legacy he obtained in the mundane realm was the word, sword, that was carved on a mountain wall. Based on Feng Qingyang's words, it was not difficult for him to figure out that this was the legacy his master had left behind. "My sword Dao can be used with any law or profundity. It's just that there's a difference in the power of different laws. For example, when I use my sword Dao with the law of destruction, its power is far greater than when I use my law of earth. Your law of space is one of the four supreme laws. Moreover, it's the law of attack that's best among the four supreme laws. In terms of offensive strength, it's not inferior to the law of destruction. You can use the comprehension of the sword skills I've left behind here through the law of space. Perhaps you can use the law of space to cast them and create some sword moves on your own. Different laws have different characteristics. My sword skills are all-encompassing. As for how much you can master, it'll depend on your own comprehension ability. Stay here. Send me a message whenever you have any comprehension. I'll come and pick you up." After Feng Qingyang finished speaking, he left the canyon and vanished before Duan Lingtian's eyes. When Feng Qingyang disappeared into thin air, Duan Lingtian saw him raise his hand again. It was not difficult for him to guess that his master was closing the formation again. Master's comprehension of the sword skills. After Feng Qingyang left, Duan Lingtian's attention was attracted by the many sword marks on the mountain wall in front of him. Each sword mark contained a completely different sword essence. Some of them had sharp auras. Some of them had a heavy aura. Some had a destructive aura. At the same time, Feng Qingyang, who had left the canyon, returned to his residence. He sat in front of the stone table in the courtyard and looked in the direction of the canyon. He muttered to himself, how much he can comprehend will depend on his comprehension ability. If he comprehends it well and integrates the profundities from the law of space well, I can bring him to the place in the Azura Hell. I successfully achieved godhood there. Perhaps he'll be able to obtain his own opportunity there. Chapter 34-39. Back when Feng Qingyang entered the Azura Hell, the reason he was able to survive and successfully ascend to godhood was because he had accidentally entered a place. That place was the only safe place in the entire Azura Hell. In the Azura Hell, apart from that place, even ordinary gods would have a slim chance of survival, let alone immortals who had yet to become gods. Immortals who entered had no chance of survival. Back then, Feng Qingyang had managed to survive not only because of his good luck, but also because of the sword Dao that he had comprehended. It was the sword Dao that had saved him. Otherwise, he would have died back then and would not have had the chance to enter that place. However, as someone who had been out of the Azura Hell many times, Feng Qingyang had no problem bringing someone into that place. For example, he had brought the heavenly savage celestial emperor Meng Luo into that place previously. However, perhaps because Meng Luo's talent was limited or his comprehension was limited, he had not been in there for long before he was suppressed by the aura of that place. He had no choice but to send Meng Luo out again. Meng Luo's talent and comprehension are not bad, but they can't compare to him. Feng Qingyang was very confident in his disciple, Duan Lingtian. Of course, Duan Lingtian was unaware of all this. Currently, Duan Lingtian was fully immersed in the Sword Scar Canyon. Apart from cultivating, sleeping, and comprehending the law of space, he spent most of his time studying the sword scars in the Summer Valley. Fortunately, any of the three would get tired after a long time. If he continued when he was tired, the effects would not be as good. Therefore, Duan Lingtian's actions did not delay either of them. It did not delay his cultivation, comprehension of the law of space, and comprehension of the sword scars on the canyon walls. I've put the Sovereign Heart Sword aside for too long. During this period of time, I've picked it up again and gained a different understanding of the sword scars. Duan Lingtian muttered to himself as he sat cross-legged in front of the canyon walls and looked at the sword scars on the canyon walls. Previously, he had tried to understand the sword marks on the walls of the canyon for a long time, but he did not fully understand them. In the end, he had a flash of inspiration, and he thought of the Sovereign Heart Sword that he had relied on in the mundane realm. The Sovereign Heart Sword was the legacy left behind by Feng Qingyang. Since his master, Feng Qingyang, had comprehended his sword Dao, it meant that the foundation he had built in the mundane realm was useful. For this reason, he picked up the Sovereign Heart Sword that he had neglected for a long time. When he had just ascended to the Devata realms, he had gained a breakthrough celestial ascension realm, he had become a celestial cultivator. However, as his cultivation base improved, the Sovereign Heart Sword was gradually replaced by other celestial methods and divine abilities. Later on, when he had comprehended the profundity of the law, he no longer needed the Sovereign Heart Sword. Speaking of which, the Sovereign Heart Sword that Duan Lingtian had comprehended in the past had been abandoned for 400 years. Currently, Duan Lingtian was only slightly over 500 years old. What did it mean for him to neglect the Sovereign Heart Sword for 400 years? Due to this reason, even though Duan Lingtian had the foundation of the Sovereign Heart Sword, it still took him a long time to master it and use it freely. When Duan Lingtian mastered the Sovereign Heart Sword again, he noticed some of the sword marks on the mountain wall had become easier to understand. He could also gradually figure out the profundity of the sword marks. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. In the canyon, Duan Lingtian practiced his sword techniques. He tried to integrate the profundity of the sword scars on the canyon walls into his sword techniques. Every time this happened, Duan Lingtian seemed to have transformed into a sword celestial as he wantonly released his sword chi. It was dazzling, resplendent, and dazzling. Apart from that, he also comprehended the law of space. The law of space was the law Duan Lingtian was most skilled in. He could integrate the profundity of the law of space with the sword scars on the canyon walls. For example, the teleportation profundity, the transportation profundity, and the cross-dimensional slash profundity could be used in conjunction with his sword techniques. As time passed, Duan Lingtian gradually gained a better understanding of his sword techniques. Naturally, there were also times when he encountered bottlenecks. However, even if there was a bottleneck under Duan Lingtian's perseverance, he finally made a breakthrough. At the same time, Duan Lingtian's strength continued to improve. Your comprehension ability is not bad. Feng Qingyang often visited Duan Lingtian. Since he was watching Duan Lingtian from outside the Summer Valley, Duan Lingtian did not know that he was constantly being watched. Time passed quietly. In the blink of an eye, another 100 years had passed. However, Duan Lingtian, who was in the canyon, had no sense of time at all. Apart from occasionally receiving the celestial fruits and celestial pills that Feng Qingyang personally delivered to him, he was usually cultivating in seclusion. Stop cultivating for a while. On this day, Duan Lingtian was cultivating as usual when he was suddenly interrupted by Feng Qingyang. Come with me. The tidal temple is rarely generous. I'll bring you to join in the fun. Chem? Duan Lingtian was startled awake. He looked at Feng Qingyang in confusion. Master, what do you mean? It's rare for the tidal temple to be generous? The tidal temple organizes the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses every 1,000 years. A year from now, the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses will begin. At that time, all the geniuses below the age of 1,000 will gather in one place. Feng Qingyang said to Duan Lingtian, the tidal temple's reward for the champion of the battle of the geniuses is an exploding element celestial fruit. Your cultivation speed has increased tremendously, and you're already a 9 palaces celestial emperor. With the exploding element celestial fruit, you'll be able to break through and become a 10-direction celestial emperor in just a few days. Feng Qingyang said with a smile, if an ordinary celestial emperor consumes the exploding element celestial fruit, he'll be able to break through 2 to 3 stages in just a few days. The exploding element celestial fruit is extremely precious even in the Devata realms and realms of gods. I didn't expect the tidal temple would use it as a reward for the champion of the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses. Feng Qingyang's eyes glinted as he continued to say, if I'm not mistaken, there must be a lot of outstanding geniuses from the tidal temple in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses. Otherwise, the tidal temple wouldn't be so generous. Even if the tidal temple has the exploding element celestial fruit, it's still very precious to them. In my opinion, the tidal temple is using the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses as an excuse to show off their generosity. However, they won't expect the geniuses below the age of 1,000 are not from the tidal temple but the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. Feng Qingyang said confidently as he looked at Duan Lingtian. He was not certain how strong Duan Lingtian was, but 300 years ago, Duan Lingtian had severely injured and killed a titled celestial emperor. Now that 300 years had passed, how could his disciple be so weak? Moreover, during the past 100 years, he would often spy on his disciple's cultivation. Although he did not know how many profundities Duan Lingtian had fused from the law of space, However, based on Duan Lingtian's proficiency in the law of space, it was not difficult for him to figure out how profound Duan Lingtian's attainment in the law of space was. The exploding element celestial fruit? Duan Lingtian's eyes lit up when he heard Feng Qingyang's words. He had heard about the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses from his 6th senior brother, Hong Fei, when he was in the Heavenly Pool Palace. He knew it was a grand event held every 1,000 years in the Devata realms. When he was in the Heavenly Pool Palace, he only knew the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses would only begin in a few hundred years. He did not expect the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses would begin in just a blink of an eye. It was said that the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses would gather all the geniuses under the age of 1,000 in the Devata realms who were publicly acknowledged as peerless geniuses. Previously, there were many geniuses under the age of 1,000 in the Heavenly Pool Palace. However, in the history of the Heavenly Pool Palace, no one had ever made it to the top 1,000 in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses. Although the Heavenly Pool Palace was not a powerful heaven-grade force in the Devata realms, it had the backing of the Heavenly Palace of the Boundless Heaven. However, no one from the Heavenly Pool Palace had ever made it to the top 1,000 in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses. Based on this, one could see how intense the competition was. Only the top 100 participants of the Devata realm's battle of geniuses would be rewarded by the tidal temple. The Devata realm's battle of the geniuses will be held in a year? Duan Lingtian's eyes gleamed as he looked at Feng Qingyang and asked, Master, which Devata realm will the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses be held this time? As far as he knew, the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses would be held in the heavenly palaces of the 81 Devata realms. This was a tradition in the Devata realms. The Devata realm's battle of the geniuses had existed for as long as the tidal temple had existed. In other words, none of the 81 heavenly palaces in the Devata realms had a longer history than the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses and the tidal temple. The primeval heaven. Feng Qingyang replied. The primeval heaven? Duan Lingtian narrowed his eyes slightly. He recalled the conversation he had with Elder Hua 300 years ago when he brought him to the primeval heaven to look for his family and friends in various Devata realms. Young master, I've told you that the elementary devouring tactic you obtained is the foundation of the advanced devouring tactic. I've also told you that the advanced devouring tactic is the divine ability that the heavenly emperors of Devata realms are skilled in. That heavenly emperor is a divine beast and a half-deity. Some people suspect that he has already attained godhood, but he doesn't reveal his cultivation base. He's the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven. End. Chapter 3440. Duanling Tian was naturally familiar with the elementary devouring technique. In fact, it was his greatest trump card when he was still in the mundane world, aside from the Sovereign Heart Sword. When he cast the Sovereign Heart Sword while using the elementary devouring art, its might was even greater. In the past he had traveled through many Devata realms in search of his family and friends. He had only passed by the primeval heaven when he heard Hualao's words. Now his master, Feng Qingyang, told him, the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven was the place where the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses was held. The heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven was ranked in the top 3 on the heavenly emperor ranking of the Devata realms. It wasn't until Master emerged from the Azura Hell, one of the 7 deadliest places in the Devata realms, that the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven was ranked 4th. Duanling Tian had heard all these stories from Hualao. Currently, his master was ranked 3rd on the emperor ranking of all heavens, second only to the 2 of them. As for those 2 people, the person ranked 1st was a divine spirit expert who was publicly acknowledged to have already become a god. As for the other person, he was suspected to have already become a god. As for the primeval celestial emperor, although some people suspected that he had ascended to godhood, he was only ranked 3rd on the celestial emperor ranking because he had never shown any signs of godhood. That was until his master walked out of the Azura Hell, one of the 7 great ominous lands, and became famous. Many people suspected that he had become a god. Otherwise, how could he have walked out of the Azura Hell? In the history of the Devata realms, almost all titled celestial emperors from 1-star to 8-star gods of war had entered the Azura Hell, but none of them had ever come out alive. Feng Qingyang was the first one to walk out of there. As for whether the 9-star war god would be able to come out of the Azura Hell alive, some people said yes while others said no. After all, he was still an immortal emperor. Unless he could become a god, he wouldn't be able to leave the Azura Hell alive. There's still a year's time. You can stay at my place for this 1 year. If you don't understand anything, you can ask me. Feng Qingyang said to Duanling Tian, the reason why I didn't disturb you in the past 100 years was because I hoped that you could comprehend your own sword Dao through the traces I left behind. My sword Dao is the destruction sword Dao. If you want to follow the path of the destruction sword Dao, it's basically impossible for you to achieve what I did. This is because comprehending the law of destruction is a long process. Moreover, the path I took might not be suitable for you. I hope you'll be able to comprehend the space sword Dao that belongs to you. I have a strong feeling that if you can comprehend the space sword Dao to my level, I might not be a match for you in terms of the strength of the sword Dao. The law of space is the second most mysterious law of the 4 supreme laws after the law of time. It's unfathomable. Feng Qingyang's words clearly held spatial law in high esteem. For the next year, I won't be teaching you the destruction sword Dao. I'll only be teaching you the space sword Dao that you've comprehended so far. You can listen, but if you don't think it's suitable for you, you can follow your own path. After all, my path might not be suitable for you. It was not difficult to see Feng Qingyang's good intentions from his words. He did not teach Duanling Tian because he knew his path could not be replicated and could only be used as a reference. Yes, master. Duanling Tian replied. In truth, even if his master did not say anything, he knew what path he should take. After all, one of the 5 divine elements, the world-cleansing divine water, had already told him about it. He could borrow Feng Qingyang's sword Dao, but he could not completely master it since it was based on the law of destruction. Duanling Tian, on the other hand, was skilled in the law of space. For the next year, Duanling Tian stayed in Feng Qingyang's residence. There was another room in Feng Qingyang's residence. Apart from cultivating, Duanling Tian would look for Feng Qingyang during his free time to ask questions. Questions were not born in a short period of time. They were accumulated over time. After clearing up the questions that had accumulated over the past 100 years, Duanling Tian was faced with new questions. Some of Feng Qingyang's pointers were suitable for Duanling Tian, while some were not. Duanling Tian knew how to choose between them. In the following year, Duanling Tian's space sword Dao gradually took shape. Even Feng Qingyang was amazed by his progress. I'm afraid all the peerless geniuses under the age of 1000 in the Devata realms will be nothing compared to you during your trip to the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven. Feng Qingyang sighed emotionally. At the same time he thought to himself, Duan Lingdan, even the peerless genius from the Tidal Temple. The Tidal Temple is destined to go for wool and come home shorn this time. Since they've taken out the exploding element celestial fruit, they can forget about taking it back. Feng Qingyang's eyes glinted as he muttered to himself. Master, when are we leaving? Duan Lingtian asked. He could leave at any time. His loved ones were all in the small world within his body. They could come out and reunite with him at any time. There was nothing else to prepare. Tomorrow. Feng Qingyang said, I have some instructions for Meng Luo today. All right. Duan Lingtian nodded. At noon the next day, Duan Lingtian and Feng Qingyang stepped into the transportation formation in the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven and made their way to the primeval heaven. Master, you've never been to the primeval heaven? After arriving at the primeval territory of the primeval heaven, Duan Lingtian learned Feng Qingyang had never been to the primeval heaven. However, after asking around, he managed to find the direction to the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven. Master, when will the Devata realms battle of the geniuses be held? Duan Lingtian asked curiously. I'm not sure. We'll only know when we arrive at the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven. In the past, the Devata realms battle of the geniuses would only begin after a year and a half. Feng Qingyang said. All right. Duan Lingtian nodded in realization. On their way to the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven, Duan Lingtian and Feng Qingyang remained silent until Feng Qingyang suddenly spoke. Duan Lingtian's eyes widened in shock. It's good to have the 5 divine elements, but don't rely on them too much. These were Feng Qingyang's words. Master, what do you mean by that? Duan Lingtian asked curiously after he took a deep breath. His eyes were calm as he looked at Feng Qingyang. Although Duan Lingtian was pretending to be calm, Feng Qingyang naturally could see through him. He smiled faintly and said, There's no need to be so nervous. When I first met you, I sensed the aura of the 5 divine elements on you. Moreover, it's not a low-form divine element. The most important thing is, of the 5 divine elements, most people only possess one type at most, but you possess all 5. Also, I can sense a strong aura of life from your body. If I'm not mistaken, the little world in your body should contain a supreme treasure with terrifying life force. A treasure of that level is likely capable of assisting one in comprehending the laws of life. Feng Qingyang said. Upon hearing Feng Qingyang's words, a bitter expression appeared on Duan Lingtian's face. Master, how did you know? Feng Qingyang smiled faintly. In fact, when one's cultivation base reaches a certain level, one can see through many things. Back then I wasn't at that level. Perhaps only a powerful god would be able to see through your little world. After all, you're only a celestial emperor now. The reason I can see through your little world is because I refined a treasure in the Azura Hell, one of the 7 deadliest places in the Devata realms. That treasure doesn't have any other use other than increasing my perception by more than 10 times. Although Feng Qingyang said the treasure did not have any other use, Duan Lingtian knew what it meant to increase one's perception by more than 10 times. One's perception was somewhat related to one's divine sense, but it was separate from one's divine sense. It was a strange feeling. If it was 100 years ago, Duan Lingtian might not have felt much about it. However, now he knew what it meant to have a stronger perception. It meant one had a clear grasp of the changes in one's surroundings. With this, it would not be difficult for one to find one's weakness and defeat one's opponent in one fell swoop. I didn't expect you to have such a fortuitous encounter, Master. Duan Lingtian sighed with a bitter smile on his face. He did not expect Feng Qingyang would be able to see through his concealment. I didn't intend to tell you about this. Feng Qingyang shook his head and said, However, you're going to the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven soon. This time, there will definitely be more than one god in the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven. At the very least, there will be a god in the Tidal Temple. For this reason, I want to remind you that while you're in the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven, it's best to seal off the little world in your body so that it's completely isolated from the outside world. It's difficult for ordinary gods to detect the situation in your little world, but who can say that they don't have any special means to detect the situation in your little world? Upon hearing Feng Qingyang's words, Duan Lingtian broke out in cold sweat. He thought he had hidden everything well, but he did not expect that he had been taking such a huge risk all this while. Without any hesitation, Duan Lingtian said goodbye to the 5 divine elements and his loved ones in his little world. Then he shut off the little world in his body, completely isolating himself from the outside world. Under such circumstances, the people in his little world and the 5 divine elements would not be able to detect what was happening in the outside world and would not be able to take the initiative to come out. Unless they forcefully destroyed Duan Lingtian's little world, they would not be able to leave. Otherwise, Duan Lingtian would die and his little world would collapse. At that time they would be able to come out. Naturally, under such circumstances they would not be able to contact Duan Lingtian. They would have to wait for Duan Lingtian to contact them. Duan Lingtian would also not be able to absorb the heaven and earth spiritual energy in his little world to cultivate. Chapter 34-41. Master. After separating the little world in his body from the outside world, Duan Lingtian glanced at Feng Qingyang. He wanted to say something, but in the end he swallowed his words. You want to ask me why I didn't kill you and take your 5 divine elements? Feng Qingyang asked with a smile. Clearly he had guessed Duan Lingtian's thoughts. Although Duan Lingtian did not intend to ask his master directly, he wanted to know why his master did not seem interested in his 5 divine elements. After all, with his master's potential, if he killed him, the 5 divine elements in his body would be more than willing to reside in his master's body. After all, his master's potential was undeniable. Even if he did not have the 5 divine elements, he would still have the potential to become a supreme powerhouse. Although this was what Duan Lingtian thought, he could not bring himself to ask. It was only when Feng Qingyang spoke that he smiled awkwardly. Feng Qingyang continued to say, although the 5 divine elements are precious to the point that even gods would fight over them, in my eyes, they're nothing more than external forces. Putting aside the fact that I don't care about external forces like the 5 divine elements that might interfere with my sword Dao, even if I wanted the 5 divine elements, I wouldn't make a move on you. You're the only disciple I acknowledge, the successor of my sword Dao. In my eyes you're no different from my own child. Feng Qingyang would never do something worse than a beast. Feng Qingyang's frank words caused Duan Lingtian's heart to tremble. At the same time he felt a little guilty. After all, before this, he had kept the 5 divine elements a secret from his master. As for why he kept it a secret, it was because he was worried his master would make a move on him because of the 5 divine elements. Only at this moment did he realize that he had been measuring the heart of a gentleman with his own caution. Master, I'm sorry. Duan Lingtian apologized profusely. You don't have to apologize. Feng Qingyang shook his head and said, it's good to be careful. Even if I were you, I would do the same. If I wasn't worried about your 5 divine elements being exposed in the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven, I wouldn't have told you about it. I'm just pointing this out to make you more vigilant. If I don't completely close the small world in my body, everything inside can still be seen through by others. After Feng Qingyang's reminder, Duan Lingtian naturally became more cautious. At the same time he also thought that in the future, unless he was in an absolutely safe environment, he would not easily open the small world in his body. If it wasn't for his master's warning, he would have been in deep trouble in the heavenly emperor palace of the primeval heaven. Soon after, Duan Lingtian and Feng Qingyang arrived at the entrance of the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven. Like most heavenly emperor palaces, the primeval heaven's emperor palace was a huge floating island behind the clouds. It looked like a primordial beast lurking behind the clouds. Occasionally there would be a layer of light flashing around it. It was the light of intersecting formations, exuding a powerful aura that deterred people from approaching it. Master, the Devata Realm's Battle of the Geniuses is for geniuses under the age of 1000. Won't there be a lot of people coming to the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven this time? Will those geniuses who don't have powerful backgrounds be able to come? Duan Lingtian asked curiously. Of course not. Feng Qingyang shook his head in response to Duan Lingtian's question. If anyone can come, wouldn't the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven be a mess? In the various Devata realms, most of the outstanding geniuses under the age of 1000 have powerful backgrounds. After all, without a good environment and resources, how can one become a peerless genius before the age of 1000? Feng Qingyang said, for this reason more than 90% of the participants in the Devata realm's Battle of the Geniuses are from the heavenly palaces, heaven-grade forces, and tidal temples. There are very few grassroots geniuses in the Devata realms. The reason these grassroots geniuses are able to rise to the top and qualify to participate in the Devata realm's Battle of the Geniuses is due to the many fortuitous encounters they have. Duan Lingtian understood Feng Qingyang's words. How do these grassroots geniuses participate in the Devata realm's Battle of the Geniuses? Do they come directly to the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven? How's that possible? Feng Qingyang shook his head. To qualify to participate in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses, one must possess strength close to that of a titled celestial emperor. Not only must one's cultivation base be that of a celestial emperor, but one must also comprehend the fusion of two profundities. Those who meet the requirements can apply for the tidal temple in any Devata realm. Once they've applied, the tidal temple will bring them to the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven to participate in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses. Feng Qingyang said. I see. Duan Lingtian nodded in realization. As for the heavenly palaces in the Devata realms, they're allowed to bring their people to the primeval heaven without having to participate in the tidal temple's assessment. Before I left, I've already instructed Meng Luo to bring his people here. Feng Qingyang said. Senior Meng Luo? Duan Lingtian's eyes flashed. He had been wondering if there were other outstanding young geniuses from the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven who were qualified to participate in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses, but none of them came with him and his master. As it turned out, his master had asked Senior Meng Luo to bring his people here before they left. As for the people from the various heaven-grade forces, those who are related to the Heavenly Emperor Palace can send their disciples to the Heavenly Emperor Palace. Those who are not related to the Heavenly Emperor Palace can only send their disciples to the Heavenly Emperor Palace to participate in the Tidal Temple's test. After they pass the test, they'll be brought here by the Tidal Temple. After listening to Feng Qingyang's explanation, Duan Lingtian finally understood the qualifications to participate in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses. All 81 heavenly palaces in the Devata realms were allowed to bring their disciples here. On the other hand, the Tidal Temple was allowed to bring their disciples here. In other words, those who would be participating in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses were either from the heavenly palaces in the Devata realms or from the Tidal Temple. There are godly spirits in the Tidal Temple, and there are godly spirits among the heavenly emperors as well. Duan Lingtian recalled his master's warning about the 5 divine elements in his little world. Most of the heavenly emperors from the Tidal Temple and the heavenly emperors from the heavenly palaces in the Devata realms had already attained godhood. For this reason, his master had warned him about the 5 divine elements in his little world. Lord Heavenly Emperor. Before Duan Lingtian arrived at the entrance of the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven, a loud voice rang in his ears. Duan Lingtian looked in the direction of the voice and saw a muscular man flying toward him. It was none other than Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor from the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. At this moment there were 3 other people standing behind Meng Luo. 2 of them were young men and a young woman. One of the young men was dressed in a light green robe and carried a sheathed sword on his back. He had an ordinary appearance, but his eyes were filled with ferocity as he looked at his master, Feng Qingyang. Lord Heavenly Emperor. Lord Heavenly Emperor. As for the other 2 people, one was a young man in a blue robe, and the other was a beautiful young woman in a light green dress. Both of them followed Meng Luo and bowed respectfully to Feng Qingyang. Yes. Feng Qingyang nodded slightly when he saw the 4 of them. Then, he looked at the entrance of the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven and said, "Since you're here, follow me." Yes. Upon hearing Meng Luo's words, the 3 young men hurriedly followed Feng Qingyang to the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven with Feng Qingyang and Duan Lingtian. At this moment, it was not difficult for Duan Lingtian to sense 3 pairs of eyes on him as he walked side by side with his master. In fact, one of the eyes was filled with hostility. Duan Lingtian turned around and with just a glance, he saw the green-robed young man with a long sword on his back looking at him with an unconvinced expression. His eyes even emitted waves of ill intent as if Duan Lingtian had offended him. Young master. Meng Luo, who noticed the hostility between Duan Lingtian and the green-clad young man, sent a voice transmission to Duan Lingtian. The young woman is the granddaughter of an old friend of mine. The blue-clad young man is the descendant of a titled celestial emperor from the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. Both of them aren't even 1,000 years old, but their strength is close to that of a titled celestial emperor. As for the green-clad young man, he's from the Mystic Sword sect, a heaven-grade force in the solitary destructive heaven. Since I'm friends with the sect leader of the Mystic Sword sect, he came with the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. He didn't participate in the selection in the Tidal Temple. Meng Luo said through voice transmission. Among the 3 of them, the green-clad young man is the strongest. Although he hasn't obtained a title yet, he's strong enough to be a titled celestial emperor. He's only 800 years old and has already become a titled celestial emperor. Meng Luo said. Naturally, he's very conceited due to his outstanding talent. Before you and Lord Heavenly Emperor arrived, I told them you'd be coming with Lord Heavenly Emperor. He's targeting you now because he's not convinced that you can become Lord Heavenly Emperor's direct disciple. After Lord Heavenly Emperor returned from the Azura Hell, his name spread across the Devata realms. At that time, the Mystic Sword sect sent him here to ask Lord Heavenly Emperor to accept him as a disciple, but Lord Heavenly Emperor rejected them. It was not difficult for Duan Ling Tian to figure out the reason the green-clad young man was unhappy with him. It was because of his current identity. He was the true disciple of Feng Qingyang, the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven. In the Literature Hall. Chapter 3442. Although Duan Ling Tian knew the reason behind the green-clad young man's hostility, he could not help but feel slightly shocked. The green-clad young man was only slightly over 800 years old, but he was already a titled Celestial Emperor. Before this, the most outstanding young prodigy he had ever met was Su Yixi, his senior sister in the Heavenly Pool Palace. However, Su Yixi had only become a titled Celestial Emperor after reaching the age of 1000. She was the most outstanding young prodigy he had ever met. His senior sister's improvement after she turned 1000 years old was remarkable. It did not take long for her to become as strong as the palace master of a heaven-grade force, the Heavenly Pool Palace. However, his senior sister's achievements before she turned 1000 years old were still inferior to the genius disciple from the Mystic Sword sect. Young master, he's just unhappy that you're Lord Heavenly Emperor's disciple. He's not a bad person, Meng Luo said. Don't stoop to his level, Meng Luo said. He was friends with the green-clad young man's seniors in the Mystic Sword sect. If possible, he did not want the green-clad young man to offend the young master of the Solitary Destructive Heaven. After all, he was well aware of Duan Lingtian's status in the Heavenly Emperor's eyes. Don't worry, Senior Meng Luo. I'm not that petty. Duan Lingtian replied through voice transmission when he heard Meng Luo's words. At the same time, he turned around and nodded at the green-clad young man. Zhang Tianyu, didn't you say you wanted to spar with Lord Heavenly Emperor's true disciple? The young woman smiled at the green-clad young man and asked softly, why aren't you saying anything now that you've met him? It was clear the green-clad young man was Zhang Tianyu, the genius disciple from the Mystic Sword sect. He was only slightly over 800 years old, but he was already a titled Celestial Emperor. Zhang Tianyu looked at Feng Qingyang's back warily when he heard the woman's words. After that, he glared at the woman. With the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven here, how could I dare to act presumptuously? Naturally, he knew the young woman was doing this on purpose. At this moment, Feng Qingyang, the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven, led Duan Ling Tian and the others to the entrance of the Heavenly Palace of the Primeval Heaven. Who are you? When Duan Ling Tian and the others arrived at the entrance of the Heavenly Palace of the Primeval Heaven, the guards noticed Feng Qingyang and Duan Ling Tian's strength. They did not dare to be negligent. Duan Heavenly Emperor of the Heavenly Emperor of the Heavenly Celestial Emperor of the Heavenly Palace of the Heavenly Palace of the Heavenly Palace of the Heavenly Seal, Duan Lingtan, the Heavenly Emperors. Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven. Not, S is young, is Heavenly Tian's, is not Celestial Heavenly Emperor, a Heavens. The young man standing before them was Feng Qingyang, the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven. Although Feng Qingyang, the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven, was famous in the past, they would not be so shocked if Feng Qingyang had appeared in front of them. However, they were shocked because the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven was ranked higher than the Heavenly Emperor of the Primeval Heaven on the Heavenly Emperor ranking. Previously, the Heavenly Emperor of the Primeval Heaven was ranked third on the Heavenly Emperor ranking. However, ever since the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven came out of the Azura Hell alive, many people suspected that he had attained godhood. It was also at that time that the Heavenly Emperor of the Primeval Heaven, who was ranked third on the Heavenly Emperor ranking, was pushed out of the top 3. He was replaced by the Heavenly Emperor of the Solitary Destructive Heaven. Moreover, it was said that the Heavenly Emperor of the Primeval Heaven did not object to this. After all, the Heavenly Emperor of the Primeval Heaven was not someone to be trifled with. In the past, he had personally gone to another Devata realm to challenge the Heavenly Emperor of another Devata realm because he did not agree with the Heavenly Emperor ranking of the Devata realm. As a result, the Title Temple, which was in charge of compiling the Heavenly Emperor rankings, had no choice but to change the rankings. Although the rankings on the Heavenly Emperor ranking were mostly objective, it was not decided by a group of Heavenly Emperors, so it was inevitable that there would be some mistakes. Some Heavenly Emperors, while displaying average strength, actually had trump cards that they had yet to reveal. Most of these heavenly emperors did not care about the heavenly emperor ranking. However, there were also heavenly emperors who weren't willing to submit to heavenly emperors whom they didn't think were as strong as them. At that time they could look for heavenly emperors and challenge them to a duel. As long as they could defeat their opponent, the title temple would change their ranking on the heavenly emperor ranking. In the past, the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven had challenged another heavenly emperor who was ranked higher than him to replace him on the heavenly emperor ranking. However, this time, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven seemed to acknowledge that Feng Qingyang was ranked higher than him. In fact, many people suspected that the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven had challenged the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven and lost. After all, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven was not an ordinary celestial emperor. For this reason, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven hurriedly said to Feng Qingyang, "Lord Heavenly Emperor, I'll send a message to the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven and ask him to inform our Lord Heavenly Emperor." As soon as the heavenly emperor finished speaking, he immediately sent a message. Feng Qingyang nodded and waited patiently with Duan Lingtian, Meng Luo and the others. After a dozen breaths, a hearty laugh rang from afar. "Brother Feng, I remember that you have my soul orb. Why didn't you send me a message when you've arrived in the primeval heaven?" An old man dressed in a loose gray robe appeared. He had a white beard, white hair and white brows. He was tall and muscular and he looked like a rough man. However, when he spoke, a hint of warmth could be heard in his voice. Based on his tone, it was clear he had known Feng Qingyang for a long time and was friends with Feng Qingyang. "Is this the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven? Does master know him?" Duan Lingtian was taken aback when he saw the old man. He had never heard his master mention the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven before this. In fact, his master even said this was his first time in the primeval heaven. "Lord Heavenly Emperor. Lord Heavenly Emperor." Duan Lingtian and the three men standing behind Meng Luo were still trying to figure out the old man's identity when they heard how the people in front of the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven addressed the old man. "Old brother Ding." At this moment, Feng Qingyang greeted the old man with a smile on his face. "I wanted to send you a message so I could find the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven without having to ask for directions. However, the spatial ring that stored your soul pearl was destroyed in the Azura Hell." Upon hearing Feng Qingyang's words, not only did the old man's eyes widen, but even Duan Lingtian and the others were shocked. The spatial ring was destroyed? Spatial rings were so tough that even powerful titled celestial emperors might not be able to destroy them. However, Feng Qingyang said the spatial ring was destroyed in the Azura Hell. Heavens! What exactly was there in the Azura Hell that could even destroy a storage ring? Moreover, the spatial ring belonged to Feng Qingyang, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. "I see." The old man smiled wryly before he said with a sigh, "I didn't expect you to go to the Azura Hell, brother Feng. The Azura Hell is one of the 7 deadliest places in the Devata realms. It's extremely dangerous. Even I don't have the courage to enter it. I didn't expect you to treat it as your backyard and enter it as you please." As soon as he finished speaking, he looked at Duan Lingtian who was standing next to Feng Qingyang and asked, "This must be your true disciple, right?" It had been 100 years since Duan Lingtian and Feng Qingyang had met for the first time. Over the past 100 years, after the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven had confirmed Duan Lingtian's identity, they had, naturally, spread the news that their heavenly emperor had accepted a true disciple. After all, this was a huge matter that could shake the entire Devata realms. For this reason, Ding Fu, the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven, had also heard about it. "Little Tian, come and greet your senior uncle Ding." At this moment, Feng Qingyang greeted Duan Lingtian. "Your senior uncle Ding is one of the strongest heavenly emperors in the Devata realms. His advanced devouring tactic in particular, is capable of devouring his opponent's celestial origin energy and profundities." Duan Lingtian greets senior uncle Ding. Duan Lingtian stepped forward. He could not help but feel shocked. The great devouring tactic of the primeval heaven's heavenly emperor was capable of devouring his opponent's celestial origin energy and profundities? After all, the elementary devouring tactic he had mastered was only capable of devouring the heaven and earth spirit energy in the surroundings to temporarily boost his strength. How could the advanced devouring tactic, the upgraded version of the elementary devouring tactic, be so powerful? "Junior nephew Duan, don't listen to your master's nonsense. He's much stronger than me. Back then, when I found out that he had replaced me on the heavenly emperor ranking, I couldn't accept it and went to look for him. In the end, I humiliated myself." "I was humiliated," Ding Fu said as he shook his head. This was the first time Ding Fu, the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven, had spoken about this matter. In the past, other than Feng Qingyang, the only people who knew about this were the two disciples under him. Feng Qingyang, Ding Fu, and his two disciples did not know about this matter. Therefore, it was only natural that no one knew about this matter. Meanwhile, the people standing in front of the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven looked at each other in shock when they heard the words of their heavenly emperor. As it turned out, the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven had indeed challenged the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. Moreover, he had lost. It's an unfair win. Feng Qingyang shook his head and said. In his opinion, even if Ding Fu, the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven, was a half-deity, he was only using his celestial origin energy. It was only natural that he was no match for Ding Fu. In his opinion, Ding Fu had an unfair advantage over Ding Fu. Chapter 34-43. Brother Feng, a loss is a loss. There's nothing unfair about it. Although I, Ding Fu, am unhappy that the title temple is messing with the heavenly emperor ranking, since you've defeated me, you should be ranked behind me. Ding Fu said calmly, if they still dare to rank me before you after I've been defeated by you, I'll definitely look for them. Upon hearing Ding Fu's words, Duan Lingtian had a good impression of him even though this was his first time meeting Ding Fu. It seemed like the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven was a straightforward person. Brother Feng, all of you should come with me. This time, it's the title temple's turn to hold the battle of the geniuses in the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven. I've allocated an area for him. Currently, the people from the heavenly palaces and title temples of the other Devata realms are gathered there. Ding Fu beckoned to Feng Qingyang, Duan Lingtian, and the others as he led the way. The environment there is not bad. Naturally, there's no need for all of you to go there. I'll arrange a place for all of you to stay when the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses begins. Ding Fu was very enthusiastic. Naturally, Duan Lingtian, Meng Luo, and Zhang Tian, you knew the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven was only so friendly and courteous because of Feng Qingyang. Brother Ding, there's no need to go through so much trouble. Feng Qingyang shook his head and said, just arrange for us to stay where the others are. Moreover, it's not a bad thing for the youngsters to meet the young geniuses from the other Devata realms. Brother Feng, you've given us a lot of thought. Ding Fu smiled and didn't press the issue. In the end, Ding Fu left with Feng Qingyang and Meng Luo. After all, the powerhouses from the heavenly palaces and the title temple were assigned to other places. As for the young geniuses who came to participate in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses, they were assigned to other places. Ding Fu asked one of his disciples to bring Duan Lingtian and the others to the place where the young geniuses from the other Devata realms would be staying. You must be junior brother Duan, right? Master told me to take good care of you. The person who led Duan Lingtian, Zhang Tianyu, and the others to the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven was a thin and ordinary-looking young man. However, his eyes were bright and piercing. The young man was thin and wore a loose gray robe, which made him look very inconspicuous. However, Duan Lingtian knew the old man was a powerful titled celestial emperor. I've heard from Hua Lao that the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven is a 9-star god of war. Both of his disciples are 7-star gods of war. Their strength is comparable to the weaker heavenly emperors in the Devata realms. Looking at the young man in front of her, Duan Lingtian's heart skipped a beat. She recalled what Hua Lao had told her before. Thank you, senior brother Wei Qi. Facing the other party's enthusiasm, Duan Lingtian thanked him profusely. When the young man appeared and greeted his teacher, Feng Qingyang, he had already reported his name. Ding Fu, the primeval heaven's heavenly emperor, also called him by the name of the secret realm. Thus, Duan Lingtian knew what his name was. Wei Qi. Immortal Emperor Gu long previously, Duan Lingtian had heard about this person from Hua Lao. He knew Duan Lingtian was stronger than Hua Lao and was on par with Meng Luo, the heavenly savage celestial emperor. Duan Lingtian was one of the strongest titled celestial emperors under the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven. Moreover, he was the true disciple of Ding Fu, the primeval heaven's heavenly emperor. Therefore, his status in the primeval heaven's heavenly emperor palace was extremely high. Apart from that, Duan Lingtian also had a junior sister who was slightly weaker than him. She was also a 7-star god of war. Junior brother Duan, as far as I know, ever since senior uncle Feng ascended to the Devata realms and became the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, he has never accepted a true disciple. Countless geniuses have tried to become his disciple, but he has no intention of accepting any of them. Along the way, Wei Qi and Duan Lingtian walked side by side. Wei Qi asked with a sigh, how did you convince him to accept you as a true disciple? When Wei Qi asked this question, Zhang Tianyu and the other two who were following behind them perked up their ears and stared at Duan Lingtian's back. It was obvious they were curious about this as well. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled when he heard Wei Qi's question. Master and I came from the same mundane realm. I was lucky enough to obtain his legacy in the mundane realm. That's how we became master and disciple. Mundane realm? Wei Qi was taken aback when he heard Duan Lingtian's words. Then realization dawned on him. Junior brother Duan, you've become master and disciple with junior uncle Feng Qingyang? No wonder junior uncle Feng suddenly accepted you as a true disciple. Junior brother Duan, you're really lucky. After all, there are countless people who dream of becoming senior uncle Feng's disciple. After senior uncle Feng came out of the Azura Hell and had the strength to become a god, there were even more people who wanted to become his disciple. Moreover, many geniuses from heaven-grade forces in the Devata realms were brought by their seniors to the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven to visit junior uncle Feng. However, all of them were rejected by junior uncle Feng. In the end, martial uncle Feng took in the descendants of a few people who had helped him greatly during his growth as his in-name disciples out of consideration for their feelings. Wei Qi said, however, he has never accepted a true disciple before. You're the first one. Yes, I'm really lucky. Duan Lingtian nodded. He did not bother to explain. What could he say? Could he say those who wanted to become his master's disciple but were rejected by his master were inferior to him? So that's how the young master became Lord Heavenly Emperor's disciple. The young woman among the three people behind Duan Lingtian and Wei Qi, the granddaughter of Meng Luo's old friend, looked as though she had just been enlightened. At the same time, she looked at Zhang Tianyu who was standing next to her and said, Zhang Tianyu, I think the young palace master is quite lucky. Wang Ting, don't use me. Zhang Tianyu said nonchalantly, I know you can't wait for me to spar with Duan Lingtian to test his strength. If I win, you'll also spar with him. However, I'm not so easily manipulated. If you want to spar with him, go ahead. Even if I have to spar with him, it'll only be during the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses. In the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses, there's a chance for two people to encounter each other. Even if there's no chance, when one of them advances to the next round, the other person can still challenge the other person to advance to the next round. It was clear Zhang Tianyu was very familiar with the rules of the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses. Wang Ting did not expect Zhang Tianyu to be so blunt. She felt slightly embarrassed and annoyed. At this moment, Wei Qi, who was standing next to Duan Lingtian, laughed. Junior brother Duan, it seems like they're curious about your strength. Are you here to watch the show or to participate in the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses? The latter. Duan Lingtian replied with a glint in his eyes. Duan Lingtian did not pay attention to Zhang Tianyu and Wang Ting's conversation at all. Both of them might be strong, but Duan Lingtian's cultivation base was not to be trifled with. Now, even his cultivation base, which was the most difficult to improve, had already reached the 9 palaces celestial emperor level, let alone comprehending the law of space with the help of the supreme powerhouse divinity. Even without the help of the 5 divine elements, Duan Lingtian was confident he could kill an ordinary titled celestial emperor with a single strike. To put it bluntly, Duan Lingtian was not a match for Duan Lingtian. In Duan Lingtian's opinion, Wang Ting and Zhang Tianyu were no longer on the same level as him. Moreover, he knew most of the participants in the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses were at the same level as Wang Ting and Zhang Tianyu. Only a small number of people were stronger than Wang Ting and Zhang Tianyu. Therefore, his opponents this time were those people. Duan Lingtian did not think any of them were a threat to him. I, Duan Lingtian, am determined to win first place in the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses. I, Duan Lingtian, will definitely obtain the exploding element celestial fruit from the Tidal Temple. Even if the Tidal Temple has a trump card, I'll still defeat them. As long as I, Duan Lingtian, am here, even the geniuses from the Tidal Temple won't be able to compete with me for first place. This was Duan Lingtian's determination to participate in the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses. Wang Ting frowned slightly when she saw Duan Lingtian ignored their conversation. She did not know if the young master of the solitary destructive heaven was truly strong or if he was just lucky. If her uncle, Meng Luo, had not told her that the young master of the solitary destructive heaven was strong, she would have challenged him. The latter? Wei Qi's eyes lit up when he heard Duan Lingtian's reply. He instinctively asked, Junior brother Duan, what's your goal? As far as I know, there are at least 2,000 people participating in the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses. Most of them are the successors of reclusive powerhouses. My master once said there are some reclusive powerhouses in the Devata realms who are even stronger than heavenly emperors. Some of them are even 7-star gods of war and 8-star gods of war. Even if it's a 9-star god of war, my master also knows of one. He's not a heavenly emperor. Duan Ling Tian was surprised by Wei Qi's words. However, he was not surprised by Wei Qi's words since it was not impossible. After all, not everyone would compete to be a heavenly emperor in a Devata realm. Some people preferred to cultivate in seclusion. There was no lack of powerhouses among these people. Faced with Wei Qi's question, Duan Ling Tian took his time to reveal his target. First place. Chapter 3444. First place. When Duan Ling Tian finished speaking, not only was Wei Qi stunned, but even Zhang Tianyu, Wang Ting and the other young man were shocked by Duan Ling Tian's words. First place? Duan Ling Tian actually dared to claim first place in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses? Was he out of his mind? In your dreams? Zhang Tianyu was the first to regain his senses. He could not help but laugh mockingly. Don't you know what kind of people are participating in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses? Even if there are 2,000 people participating in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses, there will only be about 20 people in each Devata realm. The Devata realms are so big. The Devata realm's battle of the geniuses has gathered almost all the top geniuses under the age of 1,000 in the Devata realms. Many of them are hidden from the world and rarely appear in public. That's because the rewards from the Tidal Temple are too tempting. Apart from the generous rewards, the Tidal Temple also opens a secret chamber that has been passed down since ancient times to the top rankers in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses so they can comprehend the laws. The secret chambers are filled with the profundities of the law. The profundities of the law are not ethereal since they can only be manifested with celestial origin energy. However, in the secret chambers of the Tidal Temple, the profundities of the law are energy. The more you can absorb, the more your profundities of the law will improve. It's precisely because of this that the Tidal Temple views the law rooms as their own lives. Even in the Tidal Temple, not everyone is allowed to enter the law rooms. Those who are allowed to enter the law chamber are all geniuses in the Tidal Temple, without exception. In the past, when the Tidal Temple first held the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses, it did not open the secret chambers. Due to this reason, only a limited number of geniuses participated in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses. After that, the Tidal Temple opened the secret chambers to those who rank first in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses. Since then, almost all geniuses under the age of 1,000 who are confident in their strength have flocked to the secret chambers. The temptation of the law chamber is too great. At this moment, Zhang Tianyu seemed to realize he had gone off topic. He said in a slightly fearful tone, "I'm afraid you can't imagine what it would be like if all the most talented celestials under the age of 1,000 years old gathered together. Based on past experience, I'm a titled celestial emperor who's younger than 1,000 years old. Based on past experience, at least 30% of titled celestial emperors are born. People like Wang Ting, He Jianyi, and the others who aren't even as strong as titled celestial emperors are participating in the Devata realm's genius battle just to watch the show. Naturally, if they're lucky and make it into the top 1,000, they'll be rewarded." As Zhang Tianyu spoke, he glanced at Wang Ting and the other young man beside him. Obviously, the other young man was called He Jianyi. Let's not talk about the past Devata realm's battle of the geniuses. Let's talk about the current Devata realm's battle of the geniuses. Anyone who makes it into the top 100 would be able to defeat Zhang Tianyu in less than 10 moves. Zhang Tianyu, the strongest genius in the Mystic Sword sect, a heaven-grade force in the solitary destructive heaven, only have a chance of making it into the top 500. However, you're saying you're confident you'll rank first in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses? Are you kidding me? I'm afraid even the top 30 geniuses in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses would be able to defeat me in less than 3 moves, let alone the first place in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses. Zhang Tianyu wouldn't be able to withstand even one move from the top 10 geniuses. Zhang Tianyu's analysis was clear and logical. It was clear he had done his homework. Upon hearing Zhang Tianyu's words, Wang Ting and He Jianyi instinctively nodded in agreement. They agreed with He Jianyi's analysis. You said your goal is to rank first in the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses, but I'm afraid you haven't analyzed the past Devata realm's battles of the geniuses, right? Zhang Tianyu's eyes were filled with disdain as he looked at Duan Ling Tian. Zhang Tianyu have just become a titled celestial emperor. If I enter the 9 Serenities battlefield, I'll at most be a 1-star god of war. Let's not talk about the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses. After all, nobody knows how strong the young geniuses are. Take the previous Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses as an example. Those who made it into the top 500 were at least 1-star gods of war. Those who made it into the top 300 were at least 2-star gods of war. Those who made it into the top 100 were at least 3-star gods of war. Those who made it into the top 30 were at least 4-star gods of war. Those who made it into the top 10 were at least 5-star gods of war. The person who ranked first in the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses 1,000 years ago was a true disciple of the heavenly Emperor Jianghu. At that time he was considered one of the strongest 5-star gods of war. However, after 1,000 years he's already a 6-star god of war. A hint of excitement could be seen in Zhang Tianyou's eyes as he continued to say, "A 6-star god of war who's not even 2,000 years old. You can't imagine how powerful he is." Duan Lingtian did not react to Zhang Tianyou's words. However, when he heard Zhang Tianyou's words, he was slightly taken aback. A 6-star god of war who was not even 2,000 years old? If his judgment was correct, then his senior sister, Su Yixi from the Boundless Heavens Pond Palace, was already a 6-star war god even though she was less than 2,000 years old. Based on this, his eldest senior sister was comparable to the person who ranked first in the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses 1,000 years ago. Duan Lingtian had heard about the person who ranked first in the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses from his master, Feng Qingyang, when they were on their way to the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven. Duan Lingtian knew the person was the last disciple of the heavenly Emperor Jianghu. As for the heavenly Emperor Jianghu, he was the person who ranked first in the heavenly emperor ranking of the Devata Realms. It seems like eldest senior sister had a fortuitous encounter. Otherwise, even if her innate talent was shocking when she was 1,000 years old, she wouldn't be so strong now. She must have had a fortuitous encounter. Duan Lingtian did not have much of a clue about this before. However, after listening to Zhang Tianyou's words, he realized that his first senior sister, Su Yixi, was not an ordinary person. Junior brother Duan, he's quite objective. Wei Qi thought Duan Lingtian did not believe Zhang Tianyou's words when he saw Duan Lingtian remained indifferent. Young geniuses who are rarely seen in the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses would appear in every Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses. It's as though they've gone into hiding until the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses. Putting aside me, even my teacher hasn't been to the Tidal Temple's law chambers before. Regardless of whether it's me or my master, we'll be overjoyed if we have the chance to enter the Tidal Temple's stone room of laws. Wei Qi said. Senior brother Wei Qi, have you participated in the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses? Duan Lingtian asked curiously. No, I haven't. Wei Qi shook his head. I'm not very lucky. Everyone only has one chance to participate in the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses. When I was qualified to participate in the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses, I was only slightly over 200 years old. Although I was a celestial emperor before I turned 1,000 years old, my strength was only close to that of a titled celestial emperor. As Zhang Tianyu said, even if I participated in the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses, I wouldn't have been able to rank in the top 1,000. Wei Qi sighed. That's true. Duan Lingtian said with a smile, Senior brother Wei Qi, I'm afraid not many people in the top 10 of the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses are a match for you, right? Upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words, Wei Qi smiled. Although you're right, I'm only able to achieve what I have today because I have a good master. Indeed, more than half of the people who ranked in the top 10 of the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses are still alive. However, there are also some who are on par with me. Among them, the strongest one is a heavenly emperor of a Devata realm. He's much stronger than me. Wei Qi continued to say, many people who displayed great innate talent before they turn 1,000 years old might not be able to recover after a setback. However, there are also some people who were mediocre before they turned 1,000 years old who had a fortuitous encounter later on. In short, there are too many possibilities in this world. Junior brother Duan, you have junior uncle Feng as your master. Even if your results in the Devata Realms Battle of the Geniuses are mediocre, with junior uncle Feng's guidance, you'll definitely become a powerful figure in the Devata Realms in the future. You'll even have a chance to become a god. Wei Qi's eyes gleamed when he mentioned the words God Ascension. His gaze when he looked at Duan Lingtian seemed to have a deeper meaning. Upon seeing Wei Qi's gaze, Duan Lingtian knew Wei Qi was aware that his master, Feng Qingyang, had become a god. Otherwise, Wei Qi would not have stared at him like this. It seems like you don't have confidence in me, senior brother Wei Qi. Duan Lingtian shook his head with a smile on his face. Junior brother Duan, it's not that I don't have confidence in you, but you're too arrogant. It's not that easy to rank first in the Devata Realm's Battle of the Geniuses. Moreover, the Tidal Temple even took out the Exploding Element Celestial Fruit to rank first in the Devata Realm's Battle of the Geniuses. This means the Tidal Temple is determined to obtain the Exploding Element Celestial Fruit. Otherwise, they wouldn't be willing to take out the Exploding Element Celestial Fruit. If the Tidal Temple is determined to obtain the Exploding Element Celestial Fruit, it means the young powerhouse from the Tidal Temple is at least a 5-star god of war. In fact, he might even be a 6-star god of war. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.